Chapter 26 Blade is defeated. A new choice. This time, Chen Luo decided not to hold back. Facing an opponent like Blade, only going all out is the best respect for him. Whoosh! The speed suddenly increased to another level. Under Chen Luo's full force, the space around Blade was filled with Chen Luo's afterimage. Seeing that it was surrounded by Chen Luo's afterimage in all directions, for a moment, Blade's face couldn't help showing shock. This guy, is he only using his full strength now? Although he was amazed by Chen Luo's exaggerated speed, as a fighter, Blade naturally had his own pride, so he quickly realized it. The eyes were fixed, and the next moment, Blade made another move. Swish! Dense cold light began to flow around him, waving the blade frantically. Under Blade's full force, the light of the blade seemed to form a big net, covering his whole body in it. If it was Chen Luo who dared to attack him, even with his current speed, he would definitely not be able to dodge this dense knife net. If he didn't pay attention, his body would be chopped into several pieces by the opponent. Even if a vampire has the self-healing ability of broken limb reborn, Chen Luo would not want to experience such pain once. Therefore, after seeing Blade's attack, Chen Luo's figure flickered and disappeared instantly. The next moment, not far from Blade, Chen Luo's figure slowly emerged. Sly guy. Seeing the other party standing there motionless, Blade cursed inwardly. Don't look at his set of saber skills that can be described as airtight, but anyway, this is essentially defensive, and it is very inconvenient to act. In addition, such high-intensity waving of the long knife in the hand consumes exaggerated physical strength. Even if Blade's physical strength is nearly 10 times that of ordinary people, he will not be able to maintain it if this continues for a long time. The other party also understood his weakness, and simply responded to all changes with the same. When his physical strength was exhausted, and he was unable to swing the knife, by then, he would not be far from defeat. Although he knew this in his heart, Blade still didn't dare to stop the action in his hands at this moment, because he also knew that as long as he stopped, with the opponent's speed, the winner might be decided in an instant. If the status quo is maintained, at least it can last for a while longer. It's like a cup of slow poison. Although you know it's highly poisonous, you still have to choose to take it. Judging from Blade's current situation, such an approach only delayed his defeat. Looking at Chen Luo in front of him, Blade became more and more anxious for a while. At the same time, on the other side, seeing Blade's sudden response, Chen Luo also felt a little helpless. It's not impossible for him to crack the opponent's move, but the premise is that he must also hold a knife in his hand, so that with his own sword skills, coupled with his speed several times that of Blade, he can successfully find the opponent's flaws, crack it. In addition, if he had a steel-like body, and the opponent's attack could not cause any harm to him at all, then he would not have to worry about so much, and he could break it violently by directly relying on his body's hard resistance. However, he does not possess the conditions required for these two methods, so he can only use the most stupid one, which is to wait for the opponent's physical strength to be exhausted, and then take the opponent down. What a mistake. I should have brought a knife if I knew it earlier. He secretly sighed in his heart, although he was very dissatisfied with this ending, but after the trial just now, he had at least a preliminary understanding of his own strength, so he barely achieved his goal. If the opponent doesn't use this kind of foolish tactics, then with his strength, as long as the speed is fully activated, it will be enough to defeat Blade in just a few seconds. This kind of strength should be enough to deal with Dickon in a blood god state, right? Recalling the scene of Blade and Dickon fighting in the movie in his mind, Chen Luo felt a little more confident, and a smile slowly bloomed on his face. No surprises. After persisting for a while, finally, due to excessive physical exertion, Blade couldn't help but stop. Although it was delayed for a while by relying on the various props on his body, Chen Luo's overwhelming speed advantage did not cause any harm to him. Boom! Accompanied by a pounding sound, the next moment, Blade rolled his eyes and immediately fell unconscious. Looking at Blade, who was close at hand and had no power to resist, Chen Luo's eyes suddenly became a little struggling. At this moment, in his heart, he was thinking about whether to kill Blade directly, and then use the blood cup to absorb the opponent's blood, so that as long as he drank the opponent's blood, he would become a perfect vampire without any weaknesses just like Blade. It is really hard for Chen Luo to refuse such a temptation, but correspondingly, Chen Luo admired the warrior Blade very much, and even in his plan, when he successfully killed Dickon, the Forest family would be in his pocket. At that time, he will also find an opportunity to take the other party under his command. As for whether Blade will choose to join, Chen Luo also has great confidence in his heart. After thinking carefully for a while, Chen Luo finally gave up on this tempting idea. After all, this is not the only way to overcome the weakness of vampires. Besides Blade, isn't there another option, Blood God? Whether it is to replace Dickon and summon the Blood God to descend on him, or to kill the opponent and directly absorb the opponent's ability with the Blood Cup, he can get the characteristic of not being afraid of the sun. In this case, Blade seems to be dispensable up. However, as to how to deal with the power of the Blood God, whether it should directly replace Dickon and summon the Blood God, or use the Blood Cup to absorb the Dickon who inherited the power of the Blood God. This is a problem. Just when Chen Luo was struggling, suddenly, a familiar voice sounded. Ding! It is detected that the host is facing a major decision. Choose to start. Option 1. Replace Dickon and summon the Blood God to descend. Reward, Daywalker Constitution. Option 2. Rescue Blade and kill Dickon. Blood God state. Reward, the body of the Ghost King. Note, the body of the Ghost King is derived from the same physique of Oni Wu Suji in the world of Ghost Slayer, because it has a high degree of fit with the vampire physique. When the two are integrated, the host will have the opportunity to transform into a brand new race. Be the source of the race. Tip: there will be special rewards after becoming the origin of the race. Seeing this, Chen Luo didn't even think about it, and immediately made a decision. Chapter 27 Karen's Secret Weapon. I choose the second one. Just kidding. Do you even need to think about it? Although Daywalker's physique can make him no longer afraid of the sun, but it can only achieve this level, and it does not help the improvement of strength at all. But the latter is not the same. Chen Luo did not miss the super popular work of Ghost Slayer, so he has a deep impression on the ghosts in this world with different abilities that feed on human beings. In particular, Oni Wu Suji, the ancestor of Oni, as the source of all Oni, not only has the power to surpass all Oni, but also has the ability to inject his own blood into other human bodies, thus creating new evil ghosts. Ability. And every ghost created by his blood has absolute dominance over them, manipulating the life and death of other ghosts at will, and even reading the vision and thoughts of other ghosts at will. Coupled with its extremely exaggerated recovery ability, even if only a fragment of the duplicate body escapes from the whole body, it can quickly return to its original state. In addition, the blood ghost technique unique to ghosts, if it is not for the weakness of being afraid of the sun. In Chen Luo's mind, the other party was truly perfect. If such a powerful physique can be combined with his own vampire physique, what kind of chemical reaction should it produce? There is also the last reminder about the system. As long as they can successfully transform into a new race, there is still a special reward to receive. With so many benefits here, how could he ignore them and choose the Daywalker physique? Isn't it to overcome the weakness of vampires? It's not like he has no other options. Looking at the choice displayed on the panel, Chen Luo raised a slight smile on his face. It seems that I don't have to worry about it anymore. Then, it's time to start making other preparations. Silently condemning Dickon to death, Chen Luo lowered his head, looked at Blade at his feet, and Karen, who was unconscious on the other side, and he suddenly thought about it. I do not know how long it has been. When Karen opened his eyes again, the previous memories also flooded into his mind, and he subconsciously shuddered and quickly got up and looked around. However, when she saw clearly where she was, she fell into a daze for an instant. This is my home? Turning around in disbelief, and confirming repeatedly that she had returned home, Karen sat down on the sofa weakly, with a dazed expression on his face. What's going on here? I clearly remember Blade and I being in the library, and that man. Chen Luo's face flashed in her mind, and suddenly, her face became tense. By the way, Blade, where is he now? Although she was knocked out by Chen Luo, she clearly remembered the scene of the confrontation between the two just before she fell into a coma, and she didn't know what the final result was. Subconsciously looking at the environment he was in, Karen's eyes flashed with hope. Since he came back here unscathed, Blade should have won this battle, right? At this moment, is he going to find Dickon alone? No, I have to help him. Thinking of this, she frowned instantly, got up quickly, and planned to go to support. However, the moment she stood up, on the table in front of her, her ultraviolet gun was placed on it impressively. What caught her attention the most was a white note pressed under the body of the gun. What's this? Could it be that Blade left it to me? Somewhat curiously, she picked up the note and looked at it. When she saw the content on it, her expression suddenly changed. After 1 hour, inside an abandoned factory, opening the door, Karen hurriedly walked inside. Not long after walking, not far from her, a tall, old man with white hair was holding a hammer, beating on the weapon in his hand, as if he was building something. After hearing the movement, Whistler raised his head subconsciously, and when he saw that Karen was the only one coming, his eyes instantly became serious. Why are you alone? Where's Blade? Karen walked quickly to a microscope, and while he was busy, he replied. He was captured by one of Dickon's vampires named Chen Luo. What did you say? Hearing this, Whistler's eyes narrowed. Looking at Karen's busy back, he picked up the shotgun beside him with one hand calmly, and asked suspiciously, Then what are you doing? How did you come back? Karen paused, and then she replied with a strange expression. I don't know about this either, but when I woke up, I found a note on the table with the current address of Blade written on it. Huh. Whistler's expression was a little dull, and it took a while to react, and he looked at her with a puzzled face. So you mean, someone rescued you, and then gave your Blade's address? You want us to save him? That's right. Hearing Karen's answer, Whistler became even more suspicious. Don't you think this reason is a little too far-fetched? Or, this address is just a trap, and Blade was never taken away at all. They just want to lure us into a trap, and then lead Blade to show up? Regarding Whistler's doubts, Karen actually had the same doubts, but when she saw another object on the table, she changed her mind instantly. I'll show you this. He took out a pair of sunglasses from his pocket and threw them towards the other party. When he took a look, Whistler's pupils shrank instantly. That's what you want. You have been together for so many years, you must know Blade's sunglasses, right? Also, you should have tried to contact Blade for so long in the past. Why? Did you get in touch? Hearing this, Whistler fell silent for a moment. During this period of time, he definitely tried to contact the other party, but no matter what, he didn't get any response. At that time, he already had a bad premonition in his heart, until now seeing the sunglasses in his hand. It made his uneasiness become a reality. Regarding the fact that Blade was taken away, at this moment, he had faintly believed in his heart, thought for a while, and asked with a serious face, "Then what are you going to do?" "Definitely to save him," Karen replied without hesitation. At the same time, she kept her eyes fixed on the microscope, and when she saw the results inside, a gleam of joy slowly appeared on her face. It finally succeeded. With this weapon, she has much greater confidence in her next actions. The figure of Blade appeared in his mind. Thinking of him, Karen couldn't help flashing a trace of worry in his eyes. "Wait for me, Blade. I'm here to save you." Thinking of this, Karen subconsciously clenched his fists, and his eyes became extremely firm. Chapter 28. Deacon's Arrangements. Just as Karen and the two were intensively preparing for the next action, the other side, top floor of the Edgewood building, time came to the second night. In the luxurious apartment, Deacon was sitting on a soft sofa, surrounded by several beautiful and hot beautiful vampires, and in several other corners, there were several figures overlapping together, matching the hot and enthusiastic atmosphere. The sound of music pushed the atmosphere here to the highest point. If it goes on like this, it will undoubtedly be another damage. But this is also the traditional art of vampires, and everyone is not surprised by it. As for why the party is held here, it is naturally related to the breakthrough progress of Dickon's Blood God plan. Just yesterday, he convened another meeting of vampires. When all the members arrived, he found that Gitaro, who was the chairman, had disappeared. Just as he was wondering, he was arrested by Dickon, who had already sent someone to ambush him. It's right. Although these counselors are all pure-blooded vampires, they are better than others in terms of physical fitness, but after all, they have not done anything for hundreds of years, and their fighting and defensive awareness have greatly degraded. Advantage: they were all arrested in the end. Definitely, although this operation is very secretive, these people are the patriarchs of their respective families after all. If the patriarchs cannot be found for a long time, those families will definitely send people to investigate. Once the other party finds clues and finds out that he did all of this, then in a short while, he will probably face the 12 clans joining forces to deal with him. If he was only facing one of them alone, then he still had the confidence to resist. But if the 12 clans joined forces, with the current strength of the Forest family, it might not be long before they would be wiped out by the other party. But even knowing that the family was in danger of being destroyed, Dickon didn't panic at all, because he knew in his heart that as long as he gathered all the sacrifices and successfully summoned the blood god to descend, with his strength at that time, even everyone on the other side teaming up, I'm afraid it won't be his opponent. Thinking of the various strengths of the blood god recorded in the data, Dickon's heart was very hot for a while. Soon, Daywalker is the only thing left now. As long as he also falls into my hands, the day when my plan will come true is not far away. I don't know what happened to Chen Luo. While still thinking, the next moment, the door was instantly opened. Afterwards, a person quickly came to his side, bent down, and whispered the situation to him. After listening to the other party's description, Dickon's face showed a trace of excitement visible to the naked eye, and he couldn't help laughing. Haha, finally let me wait. It seems that the time for me to realize my plan is not far away. After finishing speaking, he turned and walked out the door. After learning the news that Blade had been successfully captured, Dickon couldn't hold back his inner excitement anymore, and walked quickly towards the room where Chen Luo was. After a while, in front of a gate made of alloy, he stopped slowly. The door opened, and Dickon strode into it. The interior of this room is made of pure white. Whether it is the ground under the feet, the surrounding walls, or even the ceiling of the roof, all are made of extremely high-strength alloys. The thickness of the surrounding alloy walls is nearly 1 meter, and the defense is even stronger. There is no doubt about it. This room was built by Dickon at a large price, and it also existed as his safe house. With the defense of this room, even if it was besieged by dozens of missiles at the same time, it could completely resist it. Using such a room as Blade's cage is no doubt appropriate. As soon as he came into the room, Dickon looked around for a moment, and finally, When he saw the figure lying on the ground behind Chen Luo, his eyes lit up. He hurriedly stepped forward, looking at Chen Luo in front of him. Dickon's face was full of admiration. Sure enough, I read you right. Chen, I didn't expect you to capture Blade so quickly, and just in time. The other part of the sacrifice has also been obtained. I think we can start our plan tonight. Chen Luo nodded and said with a cooperative face. Then let's start as soon as possible. I think other families have already felt that something is wrong. Only by obtaining the power of the blood god, as soon as possible can we successfully resist the opponent's attack. After saying this, Chen Luo's eyes showed a hint of longing at the right time. I really want to see how powerful the legendary blood god is. Dickon, let's go. Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Dickon nodded with a smile on his face. But at this moment, in his heart, he felt an uncontrollable fear of Chen Luo. Just as he thought before, Chen Luo was able to successfully capture Blade this time, and the strength he showed has already exceeded his expectations. He would never dare to let such a huge threat exist. The other party was by his side, watching the blood god ceremony take place. Although Chen Luo hasn't shown anything unusual so far, who can guarantee that he won't be tempted by the legendary power of the blood god, and thus has the idea of replacing it? It would be fine if it was other people. Dickon still had the confidence to suppress them, but not necessarily if it was Chen Luo. With his strength, if he really wanted to do something, he would be in danger. No, I have to find a way to prevent him from getting close. His mind was spinning, and soon, he had an idea. That's right. Now that the sacrifices have been collected, let's set off as soon as possible, to avoid any accidents. At the moment, Dickon didn't have any hesitation either, so he immediately ordered Blade and others to be brought along, and the group headed for their destination in a car. A few hours later, everyone stopped slowly in front of a somewhat old building. Palace of Eternal Night. This is an ancient holy place passed down from generation to generation by the vampire family. It is only used for sacrifices at certain times, and few people care about it at other times. And today, in this ancient hall, a special sacrifice is about to be held in it. Entering the hall, Chen Luo and the others came to the top of the hall without stopping. This is a sealed stone chamber, with an erected iron coffin in the center, a disc-shaped groove underneath, and a small opening in the middle, like a container for collecting certain items. And this is where the sacrifice of Blade is. As long as the opponent is put into the coffin, the spikes inside are pierced into the body, the blood flows into the groove, meets the sacrifice below, and the ceremony can be successfully started, calling the blood god to descend. Seeing this, Dickon licked his lips excitedly and said impatiently, "Quickly put Blade in there." Chapter 29 The Shocked Blade. Just when his voice just fell, the next moment, Blade, who had been in a coma for a long time, finally woke up slowly and opened his eyes. When he saw the surrounding environment clearly, he seemed to suddenly think of something. His face changed, and he wanted to get up immediately, but just as he was about to make a move, the iron chains wrapped around him at this moment bound him tightly in place, without any hesitation. Can't move. Raising his head, looking at the familiar face beside him, Blade gritted his teeth and said, "Chen Luo, where is this place?" "Huh? You finally woke up." Hearing this voice, Chen Luo looked down, looked at Blade's angry eyes, and said with a smile, "As for where is this place, I think you should have an answer in your heart." Hearing this, Blade's eyes shrank, and his heart sank instantly. Before he could react, Dickon laughed. "Blade, I finally see you." When he came to the other party, Dickon squatted down, with a half-smile on his face, and slowly said, "I heard that you have been looking for me for a long time, but I am curious, what is the reason you are looking for me?" Blade paused, then slowly turned his head to look over, looked at Dickon's face, frowned and said, "You are Dickon?" After a pause, a disdainful smile appeared on Blade's face. "You should be glad you didn't meet me sooner, otherwise, you wouldn't be alive today." "Oh." A cold light flashed in Dickon's eyes, a sneer appeared on his face, and he said, "I'm really curious. Where did your confidence come from? Don't forget, how did you fall into my hands?" Blade was silent for a moment, looking at the other person calmly. "So you mean, you were stronger than Chen Luo?" "Well?" Dickon was speechless for a moment. An angry look flashed across his eyes, and his laughter became a bit colder. Dickon clapped his hands, then looked at Blade and said, "That's right. I heard that you have been looking for the vampire who bit your mother all these years. How about it? After all these years, have you found any clues? If not, I think I can tell you the answer." Hearing this, Blade's eyes instantly became sharp, and he stared at the other party firmly. An inexplicable thought suddenly crossed his mind. Could it be you? Ha ha ha. Upon hearing this, Dickon burst into laughter instantly, patted him on the shoulder heavily, and then said, "You guessed right. It's me. Speaking of which, you should thank me. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have the power you have now. Seriously speaking, to a certain extent, I should also be your father. But speaking of this, I really want to thank myself back then. If I hadn't bitten your mother, I wouldn't have gotten the most important sacrifice in your blood god's ceremony today. Only your blood can allow me to successfully obtain the power of the blood god. As long as I get this power, the day when I dominate all human beings will not be far away. Blade, regarding your risk this time, I will always remember it in my heart. So in return, I'll grant your last wish. After laughing, Dickon looked behind Blade with an inexplicable smile on his face. Froey, you are finally here. Come and see your son. You haven't seen each other for decades. Since it's the last time you meet, I'll give you some time to catch up on the old days. Hearing this familiar name, Blade trembled all over, and finally couldn't help showing a look of shock on his face. He turned his head slowly and looked over. Behind him, Froey slowly stepped forward, came to his side, stretched out his hands, and gently stroked his face. Son, we finally meet. Looking at the other person's familiar face, even though he had seen it many times in the photos, Blade's body was still trembling, and he couldn't believe it and said, Why? You should have. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by the other party. That's right. I was dead after you were born. But then Dickon found this place and gave me a new life. Hearing this, Blade was silent for a moment, and then said, So now, you have become a vampire too, right? Froey nodded slightly, looking at Dickon full of attachment. Now I am no longer the human being I used to be. It was only after I transformed into a vampire that I realized that life here is more suitable for me. As Dickon said, only we, the Blood Clan, are the noblest creatures in the world. As for humans, they are nothing more than our food. So boy, I'm really proud of you for dedicating your life to Deacon's project. Looking at the gentle, smiling face of the other party, Blade's heart that was faintly expectant fell silent in an instant. His bright eyes lost their light, and his unyielding will began to become depressed under the betrayal of his biological mother. His face there was a flash of silence, and she quietly nestled in her mother's arms. No more words. Judging by his actions, it seems that he has completely given up hope, and there is no longer any sign of struggle. Looking at this scene, Chen Luo on the side looked calm, but he sighed slightly in his heart. Regarding Blade's mother's betrayal, Chen Luo, who knew the plot, had expected it a long time ago. He thought that after he personally captured Blade, Dickon would not be able to use this whole card. Unexpectedly, at this last moment, the opponent still took it out. Killing and punishing one's heart, nothing more than that. But this is family affairs after all, so even if he decides to rescue Blade, Chen Luo has no intention of interfering with his mother. After he rescues Blade, he will handle everything by himself. Seeing Blade's lack of fighting spirit, Dickon on the side suddenly showed a satisfied smile on his face. Now that the goal has been achieved, there is no need for him to wait any longer. He glanced at Chen Luo who was at the side, and Dickon's eyes flashed. He looked at a subordinate not far away, and nodded slightly. After finishing this action, Dickon turned his head to look in the direction of Blade, and said in a deep voice, It's time. Put Blade in. Yes. Behind him, two subordinates walked out slowly, dragged the blade on the ground to the inside of the iron coffin, and then started to move. Chapter 30. The ceremony begins. Click. After fixing Blade, the two then firmly trapped its limbs and neck respectively. Finally, they pushed hard on the iron cover full of spikes in front of them and walked in the direction of Blade. Boom. A muffled sound sounded, accompanied by a muffled groan from the blade inside, and the coffin was firmly closed together. The internal spike pierced Blade's body, and then dozens of streams of blood began to flow out from the wound and flow into the center of the disc under the coffin. The blood gradually began to gather, as if being pulled by an invisible force. It flowed towards the groove in the center, and finally sank into it. Seeing this, Dickon, who knew that the ceremony was about to start, didn't delay any longer. He asked the two to stay behind the guards, and then led the others towards the altar below. However, just as he walked to the bottom, before a few people came to the altar, suddenly, a figure not far away hurriedly came to Dickon, and said anxiously, Boss, it's too bad. An elite team of vampires came from somewhere outside the Palace of Eternal Night. Without even saying a word, they launched an attack on us. And the enemy's firepower is so fierce that our people can't resist it. Now the casualties are more than half. What did you say? Dickon stopped in an instant, turned his head and looked over with a gloomy face. His eyes were clouded, as if thinking of something. He gritted his teeth and said, It must be the group of people from the 12 clans. I didn't expect them. We found this place so quickly. It seems that if these people are not left here, the blood god's summoning ceremony will not be able to continue. Speaking of this, Dickon narrowed his eyes, turned his head to look at Chen Luo, and said in a deep voice, Chen, now it seems that our hands may not be able to stop the opponent, and I think only you can do it. The ceremony is about to start now. I think it will take half an hour at most to complete the ceremony, so I hope you can help me resist for a while. Once the ceremony is over and I get the power of the blood god, I will come help me. Seeing his sincere eyes, Chen Luo nodded decisively without any hesitation. No problem. Leave it to me, Dickon. The ceremony will be left to you, Dickon. You must succeed. After saying this, Chen Luo immediately turned and left. Seeing Chen Luo's disappearing back, Dickon's eyes flashed an inexplicable color, and his heart flashed with surprise. To be honest, he really didn't expect Chen Luo to agree so readily. Looking back at Chen Luo's reaction just now, did he really not want to replace himself and get the power of Blood God first? Thinking of this, a trace of guilt still appeared in his heart, but he quickly covered it up. Then I'll make it up to him after the ceremony is over. The most important thing now is to start the ceremony as soon as possible. Thinking that he would be able to successfully summon the Blood God to descend soon, Dickon's heart instantly became hot. Quick, bring me all the sacrifices to the altar. Yes. Following Dickon's order, a group of subordinates led the members of the parliament to stand in various directions of the altar. 12 people formed a circle, and 12 special marks appeared behind them. Looking at the huge amounts of altar in front of him, Dickon walked slowly and stepped into it with an excited smile on his face. When he came to the center of the altar, he saw Blade's blood flowing down the arc-shaped blood trough above his head and gradually began to gather. Dickon's eyes became more and more frenzied. He opened his hands and shouted loudly, "The Blood God is about to descend, and I will become the new king of the Blood Clan." Hearing this, all the vampires below started screaming excitedly, cheering for their leader. Looking at the frenzied and weird scene in front of him, one of the counselors on the altar suddenly sneered with disdain. "Don't be naive, Dickon. The Blood God is just a legend. Do you really think the Blood God will come? It's just a vampire's fairy tale." Hearing this, Dickon paused, turned his head, and looked at the other party with a half-smile. "Really? Since you know it's a fairy tale, why do you still look so scared? Take a good look at yourself. Your body is shaking. But you should feel honored. You can contribute your own strength to my great cause. When I absorb your purebred vampire essence and get the power of Blood God, then this world will be ruled by Blood Clan from now on. Rule. And I, Dickon Frost, shall be the ruler of this world." Dickon's wild laughter resounded in all directions. Looking at his figure, for a moment, the faces of all the counselors who had been in high positions for a long time could not help but show a look of fear. Looking up at the continuously pooling blood above, the uneasiness in my heart became more and more intense. Just when the ceremony was about to begin, the other side, Chen Luo has already arrived at the gate of the Palace of Eternal Night. As soon as he got close, relying on his keen hearing, he had already noticed that there were loud gunshots outside the door. With a movement of his feet, Chen Luo quickly disappeared in place. The next moment, before the people at the door could react, there were terrified voices outside the door, and then, the gunshots began to decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. "No, don't come here. Stay away from me. Damn it, what kind of monster are you? Stay away from me. Don't kill me. Please, let me go, ugh." There were screams and pleadings one after another, which made everyone's heart tremble. Soon, when the sound gradually fell silent, the original dense gunfire became extremely silent again. If there were not dozens of corpses of their companions outside the door, they all thought that the attack they encountered before was just a nightmare. Just when everyone was looking at each other, not understanding what happened, the next moment, Chen Luo's voice sounded outside the gate. "Okay, everything has been resolved. You all come out. Dispose of these people's corpses." Hearing this voice, everyone was stunned, and then cautiously poked their heads out. When they saw Chen Luo walking towards them step by step, everyone finally recovered and looked at each other. As if they realized something, their eyes were full of shock. "Boss Chen Luo, that team. Have you solved it all?" "Huh." Hearing this, Chen Luo stopped slowly, turned his head to look at the other party, and said calmly, "You don't believe it?" Facing Chen Luo's eyes, the other party's heart trembled, and he shook his head quickly, not daring to say another word. "Okay, everything here has been settled, and I will leave it to you." After finishing speaking, Chen Luo turned around and disappeared in place. P.S. Today's 5th update will be sent, as usual. I will ask for a wave of data. Thank you everyone. Chapter 31 Start Action. Seeing Chen Luo's disappearing back, everyone looked at each other. Finally, someone mustered up the courage and walked out of the gate cautiously. He looked around alertly, and after a while, he was relieved when he found that he hadn't been attacked. But even so, he didn't dare to be careless, and walked slowly to the gate not far away, behind the cars the other party was riding in. But what was waiting for him was the black ash all over the ground and dozens of guns. Then nothing else exists. As one of the vampires, he definitely understands what this layer of black ash on the ground means. It is the trace that only vampires will leave after being killed by sunlight or silver weapons. It is not difficult to see what happened here just now. Is this the strength of boss Chen Luo? He really deserves to be the man who captured Blade alone. It's really scary. Recalling the back view of Chen Luo leaving just now, His heart is full of awe at this moment. The other side. After finishing off the raiding team that appeared suddenly, recalling Dickon's previous actions, Chen Luo couldn't help sneering. In the previous conversation between Dickon and Blade, even though he didn't say anything, his attention was always on Dickon, so Chen Luo could see any of his movements. Thinking about the fact that the elite team that appeared suddenly came here just when the ceremony was about to start, I have to say that this is really too coincidental. Sure enough, are you trying to lure me away on purpose? Prudence indeed. Dickon, that being the case, the elite team outside that suddenly launched an attack must also be your subordinate. I really underestimated you. There was a faint understanding in his heart, and at the same time, a glint of admiration flashed in Chen Luo's eyes. Although Chen Luo already knew that the other party was on guard against him, the other party would definitely make some moves for this blood god summoning ceremony. But just to rule out some unexpected factors, the other party was so ruthless that he gave up the lives of so many subordinates. This ruthlessness had to be admired by Chen Luo. But even if you were willing to sacrifice the lives of so many subordinates, you didn't expect that I could kill them all in such a short time. If I go over now, I don't know how you will react. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help but a smile appeared on his face. But that's just thinking about it. After all, he has already made his choice. So this blood god ceremony, he will not destroy Dickon to complete the ceremony. Only by killing Dickon in the state of blood god, then he can get the reward he wants. But before that, he didn't have nothing to do. Although Blade's two companions have been told the address here, it is still unknown whether they can find it. Even if they find it, it will not be easy for them to break through the blockade of Dickon's men. But as long as they can come here, then Chen Luo's goal has been achieved. As long as they are discovered by Dickon's subordinates, no matter how they can fight, they will definitely not be opponents of hundreds of vampires. After all, no matter what they say, they are just ordinary humans. Unless each of them has the strength of Blade, they will definitely die. But this is not the result Chen Luo wants. Since he wants to find a way to get Blade to join his team, then these two people, he will save their lives no matter what. Humans or other races, that's not necessarily the case. Thinking of this, Chen Luo smiled even more. Although he had a plan in mind, in order to make the plan more foolproof, he had to be on the sidelines to take care of it all the time. Otherwise, if the two were really killed, then his plan to let Blade join would be ruined. Therefore, before the ceremony ended, Chen Luo would wait near the gate, waiting for the two to arrive. But if the two hadn't arrived after the ceremony, Chen Luo wouldn't stay and wait. After all, he still had the task of rescuing Blade. If he couldn't arrive in time, Blade, who had lost all the blood in his body, wouldn't last long. Appearing in the dark, Chen Luo quietly looked ahead, with a glint of anticipation in his eyes. Hurry up, there is not much time left now. Hours ago, inside the Blade base, after a while of busy work, looking at the row of blue reagents on the table, Karen wiped the sweat from his forehead with a satisfied smile on his face. It's finally done. This is what you call a secret weapon? What are these reagents used for? Behind Karen, Whistler appeared there at some point, looking at the reagents on the table. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. Definitely. Turning to look at the other party confidently, Karen explained, this anticoagulant can effectively break down blood clots. It may be just a medicine for ordinary people, but for vampires, it can let them be mortally wounded. As he said that, Karen picked up a small test tube from the table and put it in front of his eyes, and said calmly, as long as such a small tube is injected into the vampire's body, their bodies will explode and disintegrate in less than 5 seconds. There is no chance of surviving. Hearing this, Whistler's originally frowning brows suddenly loosened a bit, thought for a while, and then asked again, then your anticoagulant, will it work on Blood God? After Karen returned to the base, he also learned of the existence of the Blood God from the other party. If the address he got was correct, then they would probably meet the Blood God when they went. Therefore, they must be prepared, just do it. I don't know about this either. Karen frowned and shook his head slowly. After all, I have never seen what kind of form a Blood God is, but according to the information I know, Blood God and there should be a great connection between vampires. If my guess is correct, even if the anticoagulant can't kill him, it can affect him to some extent. Is that so? Whistler pondered for a moment, and then his eyes instantly became firm. That's enough. We don't have much time now. We must rescue Blade as soon as possible. Then let's go now. Karen nodded vigorously, his eyes extremely firm. Soon, after the two packed their equipment, they immediately drove towards their destination. A few hours later, with the roar of an engine gradually approaching, Chen Luo's eyes suddenly brightened in the dark. Finally come. Chapter 32. Karen arrives. Arriving at the gate of the Palace of Eternal Night, as the vehicle slowly stopped, looking at the classical building in front of him, Karen said with some uncertainty, will this be the lair of vampires? When Whistler on the side was about to speak, suddenly, several figures slowly walked out of the gate. Seeing the people gradually approaching here, Whistler turned his head and smiled at Karen and said, If this is the place we are looking for, you will find out if you try it. Just when he was a little confused about how to try, the next moment, Whistler instantly flipped a switch in the car. Immediately afterwards, in front of the black car, the headlights that had been extinguished turned on again, but this time it was different from the past. The lights emitted from the headlights now were made of ultraviolet light. You must know that the main reason why sunlight harms vampires is the existence of ultraviolet rays. If they are irradiated by such rays, ordinary people will definitely have nothing to do, but if it is a vampire, then he can only how lucky to be able to ask for it. As the car lights turned on, the unique ultraviolet light instantly enveloped several people, like a fire burning. The next moment, several shrill screams sounded, instantly attracting the attention of countless people. Who? Someone came to the gate and just stuck his head out when he was caught by the oncoming ultraviolet rays. He let out a scream and retreated into the house subconsciously. At this very moment, the figures outside the door were all reduced to ashes under the ultraviolet light. Looking at the scene in front of him, Whistler said without looking back, "It seems that we have found the right place." Karen nodded silently. After confirming that they had found the right location, the two quickly got out of the car and began to organize their equipment. Because the ultraviolet light was always shining, they didn't have to worry about vampires rushing out, and this also gave them plenty of time to prepare. Just after the two of them finished their preparations, the group of vampires behind the gate finally came to their senses. After all, they were also the elite troops under Dickon, and they possessed all kinds of powerful firepower in their hands. Therefore, for the vampires outside the gate lights, they quickly found a solution. Throw a grenade. Blow me up that car. Yes. The next moment, dozens of grenades were thrown forward. Although due to the ultraviolet radiation, everyone could not aim their sights, causing many grenades to deviate from the channel. But with so many grenades, a few of them found their direction, made crisp collisions with the ground, and then slowly rolled under the car. After hearing the abnormal noise, Whistler looked forward subconsciously. When he saw the object rolling towards them from the front, his expression changed instantly, and he said loudly without turning his head, "Go!" Immediately afterwards, he immediately dodged and ran to the side, and Karen behind him also reacted very quickly. The next second after hearing this, he immediately reacted and followed Whistler to leave the spot. Boom! Less than 2 seconds after the two left, a violent explosion sounded. Under the tremendous power of the opponent's grenade, the car was instantly blown into a ball of huge amounts of fire, and the flames completely wrapped the vehicle and burned it up. The vehicle was completely destroyed, and the ultraviolet light that could cause great damage to vampires was also completely destroyed. Without the threat of ultraviolet rays, the vampire elites behind the gate were overjoyed, and then a cold killing intent flashed in their eyes. With weapons in their hands, they walked out the door one after another. Bang, bang, bang. However, the moment they walked out of the gate, there was a violent gunshot, and countless bullets made of silver nitrate flew out of the gun barrel and flew towards everyone. Facing the sudden attack, everyone didn't react at all, and they didn't have Chen Luo's terrifying speed, so it was too late to dodge, and they all fell to the ground. Except for a few unlucky ones who were attacked on the head or heart and immediately turned into ashes, the others did not die immediately. But because of the fluidity of silver nitrate, as long as a period of time passes, when the silver nitrate flows all over the body, they still cannot escape the fate of death. Damn blood-sucking bastards, go to hell for me. Facing the group of vampires lying on the ground with painful and mournful wailing, Whistler's eyes flashed coldly. He raised the gun in his hand and pulled the trigger without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, all the vampires here were slaughtered by him to the last one left. Coming to the opponent, Whistler lifted the opponent from the ground forcefully and asked sharply, "Where is Blade?" Behind the gate, through the skylight above, Chen Luo can have a panoramic view of the battle that happened just now. Eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the figures fleeing towards the depths behind the door. The eyes gradually became a little excited. He also didn't expect these two people to be so capable, and they could kill nearly 10 vampire elites just by meeting each other. But that's fine too. As long as the three fleeing subordinates can tell Dickon about the situation here, they will definitely be able to mobilize a considerable part of his troops, and when he gets rid of this part of the troops, it will be easy for Dickon to deal with them next. Although he has confidence in his own strength, it is still unknown what level Dickon's strength will reach after obtaining the power of the Blood God. Therefore, to be on the safe side, Chen Luo decided to get rid of all the subordinates around him first. Finally, come to deal with Dickon. But it's not easy to get rid of all these people. Perhaps for the sake of safety, this time Dickon brought all the elite of his subordinates, and the number reached nearly 300. Such a number, plus the weapons in their hands, if they attacked him at the same time, no matter how fast he was, it would be difficult for him to escape from such a hail of bullets. Therefore, in order to successfully deal with these people, only by finding ways to disperse them can Chen Luo deal with them with confidence. And the current situation is an excellent opportunity. Looking at the two people below, Chen Luo's eyes were full of anticipation. At the same time, on the other side, just as Dickon was waiting for the ceremony to start on the altar, suddenly, a panicked voice sounded from not far away. It's bad. Leader, Blade's companions have already found this place. Most of the team responsible for guarding the gate were killed or injured. Now they are about to break in. As soon as these words came out, Dickon's expression changed instantly. Chapter 33 Breakthrough, a desperate gap. Lowering his head, Dickon looked at the person with a gloomy expression, his eyes full of undisguised killing intent. What did you say? Blade's companions are here. How do they know it's here? The face of the visitor froze, not knowing how to answer. Seeing this, Dickon also realized that he just asked a stupid question. How could they know such a thing? The other party came to rescue Blade. So don't you have the mood to answer their questions? Shaking his head, Dickon was no longer interested in knowing how they got here. Since the other party came here to rescue Blade, it was an obstacle in his blood god ceremony. Since the other party may cause trouble to oneself, there is no need to continue to exist. In any case, Blade will never let go. Thinking of this, he immediately made a decision. Lori, you bring enough people to support, remember? No matter how many of them there are, don't leave me alive. Whoever dares to obstruct our plan is our enemy. Since he is an enemy, there is no need to live. Turning to look at Lori, Dickon whispered with murderous intent on his face. I see. Nodding her head heavily, Lori didn't talk nonsense and immediately turned and left. Seeing the back of the other party leaving, Dickon felt very relieved. Although the other party is just a woman, Lori is no less than the former second-in-chief of the Forest family, Kuan in terms of skills and sincerity for Dickon. As Dickon's right-hand man, ability must not be underestimated. It was precisely because he believed in his woman's ability that Dickon felt much more relaxed after seeing her leave. Calm down. At this moment he suddenly remembered something. A trace of suspicion flashed in his eyes, looked at the subordinates around him, and ordered. Take someone to search around. I want to know where Chen Luo is now? Yes. Seeing the figure of the other party leaving, for some reason, a trace of uneasiness flashed in Dickon's heart. Raising his head, seeing the blood gradually pooling on the top of his head, his heart became more and more urgent. It stands to reason that Chen Luo should come back soon after solving the elite team he specially arranged to attract Chen Luo's attention, although it is very surprising that Chen Luo can solve everyone in such a short time. But it is not that he has no other way to attract the other party to leave. However, before he could use other methods, Chen Luo had disappeared. And at this critical moment of summoning the blood god, although it was a good thing for him that Chen Luo was not by his side, the way the other party was not by his side was a little bit different from what he thought. What Dickon wanted was to hope that Chen Luo could leave according to his plan, so that the other party's whereabouts were also under his control. But now Chen Luo's sudden disappearance completely disrupted his plan. Recalling Chen Luo's actions, Dickon felt more and more uneasy, and wanted to send more people to find him, but after thinking about it, he gave up the plan. In order to ensure the smooth progress of the ceremony, after Lori took 100 men to stop the enemy, Dickon sent hundreds of elites to the top floor of the Palace of Eternal Night to surround the stone room where Blade was. The remaining 100 people surrounded the altar tightly. Under the powerful firepower, Dickon believed that no matter how strong Chen Luo was, it was absolutely impossible to break through the siege in a short time. Now his top priority is to complete the ceremony as soon as possible. As long as he successfully obtains the power of the blood god, then even if Chen Luo really betrays him as he thought, he is confident that he can kill him. Then I just have to wait. As long as the ceremony officially starts, then I can. Tick. The next moment, accompanied by a crisp sound, the blood in the arc-shaped groove above the ceiling where Dickon was at finally gathered to the peak. Immediately afterwards, no more than a dozen drops of blood fell from the ceiling until it dripped straight down on the foreheads of the congressmen below. Hearing this sound, Dickon turned his head in an instant. When he saw the abnormal state of the people around him, he was stunned for a moment, and then he reacted instantly, looking up with ecstasy. Finally, it's finally about to start. The blood god is finally about to descend. The next moment, a burst of crazy laughter echoed in all directions, and it did not dissipate for a long time. Just when the ceremony started on the other side, when Lori led the crowd to the gate, they happened to meet two fully armed whistlers walking towards the gate. Seeing the dark crowd in front of him, Whistler's expression changed, and he pulled Karen back towards the back of the gate without any hesitation. The place where the two are now is a dark and narrow corridor. There is no place for the two to hide. Although they are all carrying guns, the firepower of the hundreds of people on the other side can't compare with the two of them. If they were to shoot at hundreds of people here, they would have absolutely no chance of surviving. Now, the only way to counterattack is to exit the hall first and rely on the vehicles outside the door as cover. After realizing this, Whistler's retreat can be described as no hesitation. Seeing the actions of the two, a stern look flashed in Lori's eyes, and she said harshly, "Scatter the team. Let me rush out of the gate at full speed." Everyone keep a good distance from me. Don't give the other party a chance to catch them all. The people who had escaped before had already told her all about the situation here, so Lori also knew that they couldn't let everyone rush forward, otherwise they would be a living target for them. Only by spreading out can we bring enough pressure to each other. It has to be said that Lori's mind is clear enough, so under her command, although everyone was attacked the moment they rushed out of the gate, there were only a few casualties. Not worth mentioning. Bang, bang, bang. Boom. Bursts of violent gunshots rang out, accompanied by huge amounts of explosions from time to time. Under the overwhelming firepower of Lori's side, even though Whistler and Karen resisted desperately, they still quickly fell into the disadvantaged. The vehicle that was used as a barrier to resist the opponent's attack was quickly destroyed under the bombardment of grenades. With the gradual reduction of the bunker and the rapid consumption of the ammunition carried by the two, the range that the two could dodge was gradually reduced. As the enemy approached step by step, the two were also stepping towards desperation. Click. Finally, looking at the two whose bullets had been exhausted, Lori showed a cruel smile on her face. Chapter 34 Dying. Catch them all. Behind everyone, Lori's voice sounded. Yes. Surrounded by the crowd, two vampires came out in front of them. Regardless of the resistance of the two, he unloaded all the guns in their hands, threw them aside, and then brought them to Loli. Looking at the two of them, Lori showed a ferocious smile on her face and said, So, can any of you tell me how you know the address here? Hearing that, in the previous battle, both arms had been pierced, bleeding profusely, and Whistler, who looked extremely pale, suddenly cheered up, sneered disdainfully, and then said, Why should I tell you, Beachy? Boom. As soon as the words fell, the next moment, a gunshot rang out, and he blew the white smoke from the muzzle of the gun expressionlessly, looked at the other party indifferently and said, Is this reason enough? A shot pierced through Whistler's right leg. I don't know if it was a coincidence, but the blow happened to land on the main artery in his leg, and the blood flowed out of the body like a spring. The sudden severe pain came from his body, and Whistler couldn't help letting out a muffled groan. His originally pale face suddenly became even more miserable. But this old man is also a tough guy. Even though his life is about to come to an end, there is no fear on his face. He raised his head and looked at the other party. His eyes were like torches, and he said word by word, Go to hell, bitch. Boom. Another gunshot sounded, and after opening the opponent's left leg, Luoli finally nodded in satisfaction. Okay, don't worry about this old guy. He won't live long. After saying this, she then turned her head to look at Karen. Like Whistler, she had also been shot in the abdomen at this moment, but because she hadn't hit a vital point, compared to the former, her face was also shot more. A little bit bloody. Well, what's your answer? Looking at the other person's eyes, Karen thought for a moment. Chen Luo's face flashed in his mind, and a stern look flashed in his eyes. Then he lowered his head helplessly and said in a deep voice, Now that I've reached this point, I don't want to hide anything, so I'll tell you. A smile was slowly formed on the corner of her mouth, and she said in a word, Chen Luo told me about the address here. What? Hearing this, everyone's faces froze, and their eyes were full of disbelief. Taking advantage of everyone's stupefied effort, the movement of the person in charge of controlling Karen behind him couldn't help showing a flaw. Karen seized the opportunity, broke free immediately, quickly pulled out the light blue reagent from his waist, and turned his backhand towards Luo in front of him. Li threw it over. Under her full throw, the reagent shot out like flying darts, but the moment it was about to touch the target, Lori suddenly moved a step to the left. Whoosh! Although Lori avoided Karen's attack by relying on her subconscious reaction, the vampire elite behind her was not so lucky. With a cry of pain, the reagent was inserted straight into the opponent's shoulder, and then the light blue liquid quickly poured into the opponent's body. Seeing this sudden blow, Luoli finally came back to her senses. While feeling a little scared in her heart, there was an uncontrollable cold killing intent in her eyes. You want to die. After all, he raised his arm, aimed at Karen's heart, and pressed the trigger hard. Boom. There was no surprise. As the bullet pierced through the heart, blood gushed out in an instant. Karen's consciousness became blurred in an instant. His body went limp, and then he fell powerlessly to the ground. Damn guy. After all this was done, when Lori was about to take someone away, the next moment, the vampire who was hit by Karen's sneak attack suddenly let out a scream. Under the horrified eyes of everyone, his body began to swell rapidly, and then burst into pieces. There is no trace of it anymore. Looking at this scene, Lori couldn't help but flash a trace of fear. If she hadn't dodged quickly just now, she might have been the one whose body exploded. Recalling the thrilling scene before, Luoli felt very lucky. However, before she could rejoice for a long time, the next moment, the mutation happened again. Swish! The cold light was like lightning, and behind everyone, several icy cold lights flashed across the necks of dozens of people. Just when the next step was about to be taken, someone finally reacted. Not good. There are enemies. A stern voice rang out, attracting everyone's attention. They turned around subconsciously, and immediately, everyone couldn't help showing shock on their faces. What the hell happened? Under everyone's gaze, the dozens of heavily armed soldiers at the outermost edge of the crowd didn't even have a chance to speak. They only had time to leave a blank look in their eyes, and then a bloodstain slowly emerged from their necks. Accompanied by a burning pain, everyone's vision gradually blurred. In the next moment, dozens of heads were separated from the body, and along with the body, they slowly turned into torches and dissipated in the air. While everyone was still in a daze, Luo Li suddenly thought of something. Her face changed, and she subconsciously shouted, "No! It's Chen Luo. This guy is finally going to attack us." As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar in the audience. They would not be unaware of Chen Luo's name. Thinking of the opponent's achievements during this period of time, with one enemy against 100, the name of a butcher resounded everywhere. Afterwards, they won the confrontation with Blade alone, and successfully captured the notorious vampire hunter. Thinking of the next confrontation with such a terrifying figure, everyone felt a little bit of sympathy for a while. "You are really a smart woman, but unfortunately, you are going to die here soon." An indifferent voice sounded, and the next moment, the cold light reappeared. A figure rushed out from the side quickly, pulling out a long afterimage, without giving everyone the slightest reaction time. Chen Luo launched another surprise attack. Wielding the long knife in his hand, with the blessing of Blade's skills, Chen Luo's lethality has been almost doubled at this moment. Coupled with his ghostly speed, he is like a killing machine, setting off a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. In the blink of an eye, as Chen Luo's figure disappeared again, seeing dozens of companions around him turn into ashes and fall, the remaining people finally couldn't restrain the fear in their hearts and fled in all directions. Looking at the reactions of the crowd, it can be said that Chen Luo just fell into the arms of Chen Luo. As if they joined forces, he might have to spend a lot of money. But now, to Chen Luo, these people were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. It took less than 10 seconds for them to be slaughtered by him. Among the black ashes floating in the sky, the figure of Chen Luo walked out slowly and came to the only standing lowly, looked at her trembling body because of fear, admired it for a moment, and then slowly asked, "Miss Lori, may I do you a favor?" Chapter 35 Rescue Blade. After a while, swish! With the flash of the knife, Chen Luo swung the butcher knife without any hesitation after squeezing out the last remaining value of Luoli. Expressionlessly watching the other party's body gradually turn into ashes and drifting away, Chen Luo slowly shifted his gaze to the two comatose corpses on the ground. Undoubtedly, after being bitten by the vampire Lori at the moment of dying, Whistler and Karen are undergoing the transformation from human to vampire at this moment. After a few hours, the transformation will be completed. After that, you will become a member of the vampire. By that time, if all goes well, the possibility of Blade choosing to join him will also increase greatly. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help feeling better. Chen Luo had been watching the battle between the two of Whistler just now, and when the two were arrested, Chen Luo had quietly come behind the crowd. In order to ensure that the two would not die completely, Chen Luo was always tense and did not dare to slack off. Therefore, at the moment Karen's heart was pierced, Chen Luo already understood that he could not wait any longer. So, he decisively pulled out Blade's saber and launched a surprise attack on the crowd. And under his ghostly speed, there was no room for the crowd to resist. In addition, after being equipped with a long knife, Chen Luo has all the combat experience of Blade, and Chen Luo, who is already a veritable swordsmanship master, has fully displayed his lethality. Therefore, in less than a minute, the team of nearly 100 people was slaughtered by him. Now all the matters here have been resolved, and then the two of Whistler who were unconscious were moved to a dark place, so as not to directly reduce them to ashes when the sun came out. And just in case, Chen Luo, who was afraid that the two of them would be overwhelmed and took the initiative to seek death, tied the two tightly, and finally heaved a sigh of relief. After clapping his palms, Chen Luo slowly turned his head and looked towards the top floor of the hall. His eyes were a little dark. Next, it's time to save people. Inside the Palace of Eternal Night, looking at the scene happening in the altar at this moment, the faces of Dickon's subordinates were suddenly full of enthusiasm. However, when they were all cheering for him, they didn't notice that a black shadow flashed away and then quickly rushed towards the top floor. On the way, recalling the scene he just saw, Chen Luo began to think silently. It seems that the ceremony on Dickon's side has already officially started. At this point, Blade should no longer be required to participate. In addition, other people's attention is on Dickon, so now it is time to rescue Blade. Great opportunity. However, no matter how smoothly he thought, when he successfully arrived at the destination, he was a little dumbfounded when he saw the scene in front of him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly. After seeing the figures approaching, he dodged and retreated to a corner in the darkness without thinking, so that the other party didn't find him. What's going on here? How can there be people here? Chen Luo frowned, thinking carefully for a moment. Finally, he seemed to realize something, and a daze flashed across his face. By the way, I didn't realize just now that the number of people protecting Dickon at the altar below seems to be much smaller than before. In addition to the 100 people brought by Lori, there should be about 200 people here. However, it seemed that there were only about 100 people on the side of the altar. If so, then the remaining 100 people should be used by Dickon to guard the secret room on the top floor. But why did the other party choose to do this? I think Karen Whistler and the two of them should not be seen by Dickon. It is enough for Lori to deal with them, so the reason why Dickon chose to divide his troops must be, is it because of something else? So, is it because of me? Knowing this, Chen Luo narrowed his eyes for an instant and couldn't help but sigh in admiration. How cautious. I just got out of his sight for a short while, and I already aroused his suspicion. Just for a doubt in my heart, I can make such a decision. Dickon is really not that simple. Although he didn't expect the other party to come up with such a move, it undoubtedly fit Chen Luo's heart. Originally, he still had some headaches. What should he do when these 200 people gathered together? Chances he breaks one by one. A hint of excitement flashed in Chen Luo's eyes, and then he stopped hesitation and decided to make a move. Although Dickon sent hundreds of people to protect this place, it was not without flaws. Because the size of this secret room is not small, the people in charge of guards also formed a circle to surround the secret room, warning anyone to come to the rescue. Under normal circumstances, such an approach would be considered foolproof. There were guards in all directions, and even if someone came, they could be found in time. But to Chen Luo, it was useless. Because the premise of this method is that when someone comes from a certain direction, only by successfully spotting the other party can they play a warning role. However, for Chen Luo's terrifying speed far exceeding ordinary people, this method just gave him chance to smash. To deal with Chen Luo's type of opponent, the only way is to gather everyone together. The moment they see Chen Luo, everyone will immediately cover with firepower. In this way, no matter how fast Chen Luo is, he can't stop him. The opponent's hail of bullets attacked. If the other party really chooses to do this, then Chen Luo will have even more headaches. But what the other party is doing now just happened to give him a chance. The result was just as Chen Luo expected. When he chose a direction and accelerated his charge with all his strength, before the people in front could react, he had successfully charged into the crowd. Accompanied by the cold light, in less than 5 seconds, more than a dozen elite vampires in this direction were slaughtered by Chen Luo. Then followed suit, and after charging several times, it took less than a minute, and hundreds of people died under Chen Luo's blade. Looking at the black ashes all over the ground, Chen Luo swung his knife smartly, then put the knife back into its sheath, turned and left expressionlessly. Pushing open the door of the secret room, Chen Luo's figure flashed, and he was in front of the iron coffin in the blink of an eye. Then he forcefully separated the tightly closed coffin again, untied the chains that bound Blade's limbs, and dragged Blade's body, put it lightly on the ground. It seems that he must absorb the blood as soon as possible to recover his strength. Seeing Blade's somewhat pale face, Chen Luo stopped hesitation, and with a thought, the blood cup appeared in his hand again. Just as he was about to make a move, the next moment, a stern voice came from the gate. "Stop! Put Blade down." Chapter 36. The ceremony is over, Blood God Dickon. At the gate behind Chen Luo, the visitor looked at Chen Luo and Blade with shock and anger in their eyes. After being sent by Dickon to search for the traces of Chen Luo in the hall, he led a vampire team to search around. Not long after that, there were constantly shrill screams from the top floor of the hall. "Spirit, lead people to hurry here." Not only them, but also the cheering people at the altar also heard the movement from above. Their expressions changed one after another, and when they subconsciously wanted to check the situation, Dickon's voice suddenly sounded. "Don't go. Stay here for me." Regarding the movement upstairs, he also had some guesses in his heart. If what he expected was correct, it should be Chen Luo who finally chose to do something to save Blade. Although I don't understand the purpose of the other parties doing this, it doesn't matter now. Now is the critical moment when the ceremony is about to be completed. If everyone else leaves during this period of time, if Chen Luo suddenly comes back, wouldn't he make a wedding dress for the ceremony he had prepared for a long time? Anyway, it doesn't matter whether Blade is dead or alive. As long as the ceremony is successful and he can successfully obtain the power of Blood God, even if Chen Luo and Blade join forces, he has absolute confidence that he can defeat each other. He didn't make him wait long, and finally, with the sound of painful wailing around Dickon, the Blood God ceremony came to an end. The blood dripping on the foreheads of a congressman finally began to take effect at this moment. As the blood gradually penetrated into the bodies of everyone, the next moment, a severe pain like a fire came from the body. Blood, flesh and blood melted in this powerful heat. In the end, all the people wrapped in only one piece of skin left their bodies floating in the sky involuntarily, and their mouths were slowly torn open. Then, Under the shocked eyes of everyone below, skeletons with wings on their backs climbed out of several people's mouths and flew in the center of the altar. Immediately afterwards, above the ceiling where Dickon was, the last drop of blood that had been accumulated for a long time slowly dripped on his forehead. The moment the blood dripped, the 12 flying skeletons seemed to be attracted by something, and they all rushed towards him. Dickon, fly away. Come on. Let me experience the power of the blood god. Opening his hands, looking at the crowd of skeletons flying in the sky, Dickon shouted with fanaticism on his face. The next moment, with his muffled groan, one after another skeletons continued to walk past him, and an unknown force began to emerge in his body, and then quickly began to transform his body. Feeling the constant power emerging from his body, Dickon clenched his hands tightly, his eyes gradually turned blood red, and a satisfied smile slowly appeared on his face. Finally, when the transformation was coming to an end, as if they were finally satisfied with this body, the 12 skeletons waved their devil-like bone wings and rushed into Dickon's body one after another, disappearing without a trace. Under the altar, everyone was silent, staring at the front without moving, eyes full of expectation and tension. After a moment of silence, Dickon finally moved. He turned around slowly and looked at the crowd. The pupils in the eyes had disappeared, and the eyes became blood red, as if filled with blood. With a cheerful smile on his face, Dickon opened his hands and spoke slowly. The blood god has come, and a new era will be born from my hands. The other side. Just when the other party arrived and pointed the gun at Chen Luo, the next moment, Chen Luo suddenly made a move. A long afterimage flashed across his body, and in less than a second, Chen Luo had already arrived in front of the other party. When the long knife was swung, cold lights flashed, and with Chen Luo's exaggerated speed, most of the people were killed by him in an instant without even having time to react. Only the leader was left standing there with a gun. Swish! The opponent's palm was cut off with a single knife, and the gun fell in response. Without the weapon, this person completely lost the room to resist, hugging the broken wrist, lying on the ground, full of painful wailing. Chen Luo's figure reappeared, holding a blood cup in his hand. Without the slightest sympathy on his face, he grabbed the opponent. His sharp nails cut through the opponent's skin in an instant, and a large amount of blood flowed out like a spring. Aim the wound at the mouth of the blood cup, and let the blood continue to gush out. After a while, when the blood finally stopped flowing, the opponent's body also gradually stopped shaking and completely lost its vitality. With the flash of the knife, the opponent's body quickly burned up, turning into black ashes and floating away. After getting rid of the casually grabbed toolman, Chen Luo lowered his head and looked in the direction of the blood cup. As the blood poured in, the whole body of the blood cup began to emit a bloody halo, firmly covering the mouth of the cup. Soon, when the halo dissipated, the originally thick and somewhat stinky blood instantly became much clearer, and even the smell had some intoxicating fragrance, so beautiful. It looked like a work of art generally. There is no doubt that after the transformation of the blood cup, the blood contained in the blood cup at this moment is the best food for vampires. Originally, for vampires, the blood of the same kind had no effect on them, but with the artifact of the blood cup, no matter what liquid it was, as long as it was transformed through the blood cup, it could be transformed into enough for their bodies to absorb blood. And after drinking this kind of blood, whether it is for the growth of the vampire or the healing of the wound, it has a very obvious effect. Such an effect is exactly what Blade needs most. Looking at the blood that has been transformed, Chen Luo has no hesitation, picked up the blood cup and walked towards Blade. Coming to the other party, seeing the other party's pale lips and angry face, Chen Luo understood that if he was not treated in time, his life would gradually come to an end. Now the other party has fallen into a coma, without the ability to actively eat. So Chen Luo opened the other party's mouth without thinking, and poured the blood in the blood cup roughly, and waited until all the blood was poured into the other party's body. Chen Luo then stood aside and quietly began to wait. After a while, as the blood merged into Blade's body and was nourished by the blood, the wounds on Blade's body also healed quickly. Blood gradually appeared on his face, and his originally weak body was full of vitality again, and even became stronger than before. Powerful. Finally, under the watchful eyes of Chen Luo, Blade slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 37. Chen Luo arrives, slaughtering the audience. You finally woke up. Opening his eyes, Blade was a little confused when suddenly, a familiar voice rang in his ears. Subconsciously turned his head and looked over. When he saw the person coming, Blade frowned and said softly, Chen Luo? Raising his hands, looking at his recovered body, feeling the unprecedented vitality in his body, as if he suddenly thought of something, Blade looked at Chen Luo with some doubts and asked, You saved me? Why? It's very simple. Chen Luo shrugged and looked at the other party with a smile. The reason why I brought you here is just to see how strong that so-called blood god is. Now that the ceremony has begun, the role has also been completed. In addition, it is a pity to see you die here, so I will help you a little bit. After saying this, Chen Luo stretched out his right hand and said with a smile, well, we're even. How about it? Bastard. Do you think I can't afford to lose? Blade looked at the other party angrily. Since I was defeated by you before, then I have nothing to say. Just let it be evened or something. When I owe you, you are a favor. After that, a smile appeared on his face. His big white teeth gleamed. At most, I will let you go when I catch you next time. Then he took Chen Luo's hand, took advantage of the momentum to stand up, looked around, looked at the layer of ashes scattered under his feet. Blade looked at Chen Luo with some doubts and said, you did all of this? Then what's the matter? Glancing at the other party angrily, he casually threw the long knife in his hand. Your knife? Take it. Taking the long knife, he skillfully twisted the blade and gently stroked the blade. Blade's eyes were full of nostalgia. Before he could say anything, Chen Luo seemed to think of something again, took out his sunglasses from his pocket, and threw it at the other party. By the way, in this, I found it from your little girlfriend. After receiving the sunglasses, a gleam of joy appeared on Blade's face, and then became stiff instantly. Karen, how is she? What did you do to her? I said, can you stop thinking of me as a villain? What can I do to her? After the battle with you, I put her back. Hearing this, Blade just breathed a sigh of relief, and then Chen Luo's voice sounded again. It's just that after sending her back, I told her the address here. Oh yes, not long ago, she and an old man seemed to come here to save you. What did you say? In an instant, Blade couldn't bear it any longer, looked at Chen Luo fiercely, and roared angrily, you bastard, don't you understand that doing this will only send them to death? Why would you do that? At this moment, Blade's eyes were full of anger. If he hadn't been rescued by the other party before, he might have swung a knife at him by now. Don't worry, they're all fine. Chen Luo looked at each other calmly and said slowly, although they are all unconscious now, none of them are in danger of life. I've already placed them in another place. What will happen? And I also want to thank them for attracting the attention of Dickon's subordinates. Otherwise, it would be difficult to deal with so many people. Hearing this, Blade instantly understood his intentions, gritted his teeth and said, you bastard with a bad personality. So you called Karen and the others here to be your bait? It's understandable. Chen Luo nodded and then said, but you don't know my speed. Although they are bait, but with me here, they will not be in any danger. Looking at the confident face of the other party, Blade also fell silent for a while. Regarding Chen Luo's speed, he was deeply impressed at the beginning, and he naturally understood that what the other party said was very reasonable. Now that he knew that Karen Whistler and the others were not in danger, the anger in his heart gradually calmed down. Seeing this, Chen Luo smiled and was about to say something. Then, bursts of fanatical shouts came from below and fell into the ears of the two. Great! The boss finally succeeded, and the world dominated by our blood clan is finally coming. Lord Dickon is the strongest in the world, and now there is nothing that can stop us. Is this the blood god? The current Lord Dickon is really too strong. Hearing this, both Chen Luo and Chen Luo were taken aback and looked at each other subconsciously. Then, there was an inexplicable smile on their faces. Looks like Dickon has finally succeeded. It's not in vain that I've waited so long. I have already had a debt to settle with Dickon. It seems that now is a good opportunity. I think Dickon can be dealt with at the end. Let's deal with his subordinates first. Otherwise, it will be a trouble for us. That makes sense. Blade nodded approvingly, then changed the subject and said, in this case, let's compare each other. In the second round, let's see who kills the most. Huh. Chen Luo turned his head, looked at Blade's fighting smile, raised his eyebrows with a smile. Okay, no problem. Okay, let's do it on the count of 3. The two came to the secret room, leading directly to the high platform of the altar at the bottom. Blade's body tensed up instantly and said in a deep voice. However, before he could start, the next moment, Chen Luo jumped down first. As soon as he touched the ground, without saying a word, his body turned into afterimages and quickly entered the crowd. Damn, this cunning fellow. Seeing this, Blade cursed secretly and jumped off the high platform without further delay, landing a roll, taking advantage of the momentum to eliminate the impact, then quickly got up, like a tiger, rushed towards the crowd in front. Swish! Sun Han's saber light flashed, and under his superb saber skills, there was almost no enemy in front of the crowd, because the two of them appeared so suddenly that they had no time to react, and they rushed into the crowd. There are all companions around. Even if they want to raise their guns and shoot, they will have a lot of concerns, and this just gives them a chance. The figure of Chen Luo shuttled through the crowd like a ghost, and the silver-plated steel wire in his hand was extremely sharp. Whenever Chen Luo passed by a person, his head rolled and fell, and then turned into ashes and floated in the air. On the other side, Although Blade's killing efficiency is not as terrifying as Chen Luo's, his title as a vampire hunter is not for nothing. His superb fighting skills, coupled with his further physical fitness, are like chopping melons and vegetables. In less than a minute, dozens of lives fell in his hands. With the astonishing efficiency of the two, it didn't take long for all the vampires present to be slaughtered by the two. Black ash filled the air, and in the suddenly empty hall, the originally noisy air became quiet. Immediately afterwards, heavy footsteps sounded. Chapter 38 The Power of the Blood God. Stepping on the ashes under their feet, the two walked towards Dickon step by step. Coming in front of Dickon, seeing the other person's appearance at the moment, Blade's expression changed, and he said with great interest, "Is this the Blood God? It looks like nothing has changed except for the eyes." After finishing speaking, he turned his head to look at Chen Luo with some pity. "It seems that you have been waiting for so long in vain. If the Blood God only has this level, then it is enough for me to solve it alone." In this regard, Chen Luo smiled slightly, did not refute, made a gesture of invitation, and then said, "Since you are so confident, let you try it first." After all, under Blade's slightly surprised gaze, Chen Luo slowly stepped back a few steps and came to the edge of the altar, with his hands folded on his chest, as if he was watching a good show. After being stunned for a moment, a smile appeared on Blade's face, and he said, "Then I won't be polite." Just in time. This guy, and I still have a debt to settle. Dragging the long knife backwards, he drew a long trace on the ground, and slowly came to Dickon. A strong killing intent flashed in his eyes covered by sunglasses. Facing this situation, he turned him into what he is now. The culprit, Blade, didn't even want to say a word. Holding a long knife, he slashed at the opponent's body heavily. Faced with such an attack, Dickon didn't even have the slightest intention of dodging. With a smile on his face, he quietly waited for the attack to come. Swish! Accompanied by a flash of cold light, under Blade's full swing, Blade slashed along the opponent's body without any hindrance and walked straight out from under the opponent's body. With a swing of the knife, Blade stood up, turned around gracefully, and stood with the knife. With his back to Dickon, he looked in Chen Luo's direction and smiled slightly. Chen Luo didn't say a word, but glanced behind Blade, with an unknown smile on his face. Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Blade frowned, followed Chen Luo's gaze, and looked back subconsciously. K? Subconsciously swearing, Blade's eyes widened subconsciously, as if he saw some incredible scene, and fell into a daze for an instant. Behind him, Dickon's body was instantly split into two with the swing of his knife. Logically speaking, such an injury would never escape the fate of death, but an accident happened to the other party. Although the body has been divided into two halves, there is no blood flowing down. On the contrary, in the center of the opponent's body, the blood seems to be unaffected by gravity, suspended in mid-air. Under the pull of the blood, the body that had been cut in half gradually closed in the middle, and under Blade's shocked eyes, it quickly began to heal. The whole process took less than 5 seconds, and the opponent's body was completely restored to its original state. Lowering his head and looking at his intact body, Dickon laughed out of satisfaction. His eyes glistened with blood, and his face was full of fanaticism. "This is the power of the Blood God. I finally got it. This kind of power is like a god." Slowly raising his head, looking at Blade, Dickon waved his hand with a smile and said, "Come on, Blade, don't you want to take revenge on me? Then show your full strength and let me see what the legendary vampire hunters are up to." Hearing this, Blade finally came back to his senses and stared at the other party, with a confident smile on his face again. It's just that the recovery speed is a little faster. Since one knife can't solve it, then just cut a few more times. I don't believe that you still can't really achieve regenerative healing factor. Although he was startled by the opponent's move just now, Blade was experienced in many battles after all, so he quickly recovered and regained his confidence. Since cutting him in half can't kill him, let's try cutting him a few more times. He still doesn't believe that if he cuts him into hundreds of pieces, he can return to his original state like before. Having made up his mind, Blade didn't talk nonsense and stepped forward decisively with the knife and slashed with the knife again. However, this time, Dickon did not choose to sit still. I saw him stretch out his hands and then slapped hard. Coincidentally, the long knife that Blade swung over just happened to be caught in the center of his palm. No matter how hard Blade tried, the opponent didn't seem to feel it, and he didn't intend to let go at all. He chuckled lightly, and then under Blade's astonished eyes, Dickon lifted his foot and kicked. The next moment, huge amounts of power exploded on Blade's chest. Involuntarily, the whole body instantly flew backwards and embeds itself into the wall behind. Boom! A human-shaped deep pit appeared on the wall in an instant, cracks began to spread around it, and countless rubbles fell in clusters. Looking at his masterpiece, Dickon smiled with satisfaction, and then turned his head to look in the direction of Chen Luo. Holding the long knife he had just snatched from Blade in his hand, Dickon gradually showed a hideous look on his face. Chen Luo, it's your turn next. I will let you know the price of betraying me. In response, Chen Luo chuckled and was about to answer, but at this moment, Blade's voice sounded again. Wait a moment. Afterwards, Blade raised his head with difficulty, exerted force all over his body, broke free from the wall behind him, and returned to the ground again. Under the effect of the vampire physique, although he suffered some minor injuries just now, as he came to Dickon step by step, the original injuries have healed again, and there is no serious problem at all. I think it's too early for you to be happy. Our battle has just begun. Oh. Dickon looked at the other party with interest. The corners of his mouth became wider and wider. Since you want to come here to die, then I will satisfy you. I want to see, how long can you hold on? As he said that, Dickon held the knife in both hands and slashed down on Blade with all his strength. After the confrontation just now, Blade, who understood the formidable strength of the opponent, had no intention of going head-to-head. He rolled on the spot, moved flexibly, and calmly avoided the opponent's attack. Afterwards, Blade kept moving, and immediately stood up, stretching out his hand to his waist. The next moment, on his tactical vest, Blade pulled out a shiny steel wire, wrapping Dickon's arms tightly. Then, Blade's arms suddenly exerted force, and the steel wire instantly tightened and contracted, successfully wrapping Dickon. Dickon's arms are amputated. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Blade snatched the long knife back from the opponent's hand without thinking about it, then turned around and made another horizontal cut. Following a flash of cold light, the next moment, a bloodstain slowly appeared on Dickon's neck. Under his surprised eyes, his head fell to the ground in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the outcome is already decided. Chapter 39. The Siege, Chen Luo and Blade's teaming up. Seeing the series of actions Blade made in this short moment, Chen Luo, who was at the side, also secretly praised him. After the battle just now, Chen Luo discovered that after gaining the power of the Blood God, besides having the same ability as the regenerative healing factor, Dickon also had great strengthening in terms of strength. If it was said that Dickon was weaker than Blade in terms of strength before, then Blade is no longer the opponent's opponent now. In addition, Blade's use of the silver-plated long knife just now did not have any impact on it. Obviously, as recorded in the data, Dickon, who has the power of a blood god, no longer has the weaknesses of vampires. Such an opponent is undoubtedly very difficult to presence. But fortunately, the opponent's combat awareness remained unchanged from before, so even though he had an advantage in physical fitness, Blade was still able to fight against it with his rich combat experience. If the opponent really has limited recovery abilities as Blade thinks, then in the end, Blade still has great confidence in winning. As Chen Luo thought, as if to verify their point of view. After chopping off Dickon's head, Blade kept moving, slashing at the opponent's body until Dickon's body was chopped into pieces. After 100 steps, he slowly retracted his knife and stood up. Haha, I don't believe it now. You can still survive? Due to the exhaustion of a lot of physical energy, Blade's breathing became a little short, but his eyes still looked forward without blinking, waiting for the final result. However, to his disappointment, even though his body was cut into hundreds of pieces, these fragments showed no sign of dissipating. Blood filled the sky, like a big net, pulling Dickon's body firmly. Then, under his shocked gaze, they shrank and closed again. Still less than a few seconds later, Dickon appeared in front of the two of them again intact. Seeing the unconcealable astonishment on Blade's face, he burst out laughing in satisfaction. Haha, what a pity. I'm afraid I will disappoint you. The me I am today is a regenerative healing factor in the true sense. Blade, no matter what method you use, you will never be my opponent again. After all, Dickon turned his head to look in the direction of Chen Luo, raised his head slightly, waved his hands, and said with a condescending smile on his face, I said, you can go to bed together. There is no need to waste time. Today I will use your blood to celebrate my new birth. Come on, just let me. Before he could finish his sentence, the next moment, a long afterimage flashed across not far away, and accompanied by a flash of cold light, Dickon's body was cut in half again. You talk a lot, Dickon. The figure of Chen Luo emerged beside Blade, stood up slowly, straightened his gloves leisurely, and said lightly, Damn it, Chen Luo, Blade, you guys are going to die. The body recovered again, and Dickon's eyes flashed with tyrannical killing intent, and his blood-red eyes stared directly at the two of them. Under the amazed gaze of the two, his hands were quickly wrapped in blood, and suddenly swelled several times, turning into two handles. The giant hammer smashed fiercely at the two of them. The air in front exploded, and before Dickon's attack came, the hunting wind rushed towards them one step ahead, blowing the cheeks of both of them began to ache. Its power can be imagined. Faced with this powerful blow, Chen Luo didn't panic at all. With a flash of his figure, he took Blade beside him out of the opponent's attack range. 10 meters behind the opponent, the two of them reappeared. Let's do it together. If it doesn't work once, try a few more times. Even the regenerative healing factor should consume energy. I don't believe that he can maintain this form forever. With his eyes fixed on the front, a trace of excitement faintly flashed across Chen Luo's face. This is the first time I have seen such a difficult opponent. But that's good too. So he would take this opportunity to see if there is any limit to this regenerative healing factor. If the power of the blood god is really as strong as he imagined, then this ability, he wants to know. Deal. On the other side, Blade slowly drew out the long knife. A cold killing intent bloomed on his body. He moved his feet and instantly attacked the opponent. Although he didn't speak, at this moment he has proved his answer with actions. Seeing this, Chen Luo didn't talk nonsense. His figure flickered, and he turned into an afterimage again and surrounded Dickon. Although it was only the first time for the two to cooperate, Chen Luo and Blade were a little surprised that there was quite a tacit understanding between the two of them. Whenever Blade launched an attack, taking advantage of the gap between Dickon and him, Chen Luo would always appear on the side at the right time, instantly beheading the opponent and interrupting his attack. Then, Blade took advantage of the situation and took advantage of the moment the opponent's head was cut off, and swung dozens of knives in the blink of an eye, chopping the opponent into pieces again. If it was just one time, he didn't care much, but what annoyed him was that because he was not as fast as Chen Luo, every time he faced Chen Luo's attack, he couldn't stop him. As the head was severed by Chen Luo again and again, and then with Blade's tacit cooperation, in the next half an hour, he experienced the above-mentioned process hundreds of times in succession. Although the body can be successfully repaired again and again, the aggrieved feeling that he can't fight back after being beaten is still tormenting him almost crazy. Ah, damn traitor. Chen Luo, I want you to die. The body returned to its original shape again, and Dickon looked at Chen Luo with madness on his face. He didn't even care about the attack from the blade behind him, and rushed towards Chen Luo with all his strength. Swish. The next moment, Chen Luo's figure flashed and appeared behind the opponent. In just a split second, the opponent's head was cut off by him again and fell to the ground. However, before he could be happy, another familiar scene came. Under the traction of blood, the opponent's head slowly rose and fell back to the neck, and then quickly began to heal. It's really troublesome. This has been done hundreds of times, and his recovery ability still looks the same as before. Could it be that he is really a regenerative healing factor now? Chen Luo frowned slightly and looked calmly at the direction of Blade not far away. When he saw the other's shortness of breath and sweating profusely, his heart sank. Obviously, after this period of fierce fighting, Blade's physical strength has been consumed by half. Although Chen Luo's condition is slightly better, his physical strength is almost bottoming out at this moment. If he still can't think of a way to deal with Dickon, then he had to choose to leave. With his speed, Chen Luo is confident that even if he takes Blade with him, he will be able to leave successfully, but this result is not what he wants to see. Since there is no way to solve it by strength, he has to use technology. Looks like it will be used in the end. Calmly touching the tube of light blue reagent on his waist, Chen Luo thought helplessly. Chapter 40. The Horror of the Blood Cup, Forcibly Absorbed. After all, he already knows all about Blade's plot, so although Dickon's regenerative healing factor is very difficult, it is not without a solution. According to the plot, the reason why Blade was able to successfully defeat Dickon in the end was because of the anticoagulant effect brought by Karen. This reagent can be regarded as a big killer for vampires. Similarly, it also has a miraculous effect on Dickon, who is in a blood god state. Although it may be because the regenerative healing factor was too powerful, it took nearly 10 tubes of reagents for Blade to explode and kill him, but these were not a problem for Chen Luo at all, because Chen Luo had already found this reagent on Karen when he was cleaning the battlefield before. There are more than 10 tubes in a row, and he still can't believe that when he injects all these reagents into the opponent's body, his regenerative healing factor will still be safe and sound. Thinking of this, Chen Luo couldn't help showing a confident smile on his face. That's it, Dickon. This is the cemetery I specially selected for you. After you die, I will accept everything about you without hesitation. Hee. So that's it. The body returned to its original shape again. Staring at Chen Luo's direction, Dickon's face was full of ferocious smiles. It seems that my hunch was right at the beginning. So what about a person like you? Will be willing to live under others? Presumably from the first day you joined the family, you have already had this year in your heart, right? Just understand it like this. In short, no matter what, we are born on opposite sides. I must accept your life. Chen Luo didn't intend to explain anything about this, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes, moved his feet, and then disappeared in place in an instant. Bye now. The next moment, Chen Luo quickly came to the opponent, stretched out his hand to his waist, took the reagent in his hand in an instant, and stabbed at the opponent. In an instant, when Chen Luo appeared again, he came to Blade and stood quietly, admiring his masterpiece just now. What's this? Seeing the reagents on Dickon's body, Blade looked at Chen Luo with some doubts and asked, a good thing to deal with vampires. I found it on your little girlfriend. Chen Luo turned his head and explained with a smile. Damn it, Karen isn't my girlfriend. Blade's face darkened, and he complained, then changed the topic, looked ahead with serious eyes, and asked softly, is this thing useful? Then, just about to say something, but at this moment, Chen Luo suddenly closed his mouth after seeing the changes in Dickon. As the reagent was injected into the body, Dickon's face suddenly became extremely painful at the very beginning, and he held his head in pain and screamed miserably. At the same time, huge amounts of sarcoma surged up on his body and began to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Dickon's entire body swelled accordingly, as if it was about to explode and shatter at any time. Seeing such a change, Chen Luo were immediately overjoyed, but before they could be happy for a long time, the next moment, with Dickon's next actions, the situation changed again. Just at the critical point about to explode, Dickon suddenly opened his mouth wide, and the corner of his mouth opened a huge amount of arc. Afterwards, the sarcoma all over his body surged rapidly, along the throat, and finally spewed out one by one. Wow! Immediately afterwards, dozens of dark red coagulated blood clots appeared on the ground. As these blood clots were spit out, Dickon's body also quickly returned to its original state, and there was no change except for a slightly sluggish face. Chen Luo, do you still have those reagents? Give him a few more injections, maybe you can really kill him. Seeing this scene, Blade also reacted quickly, knowing that although the reagent just now failed to kill the opponent, it must have had a certain impact on him. From this point of view, as long as he can give the opponent a few more injections, then killing the opponent will also be possible. It is not impossible. Thinking of this, Blade's eyes suddenly brightened. However, when he turned his head to look at Chen Luo expectantly, what caught his eyes was Chen Luo's helpless face at that time. Wait, you don't run out of stock, do you? Aren't you talking nonsense? That little girlfriend of yours brought so much, and I just used it up. Chen Luo looked at the front helplessly and sighed in his heart. He also didn't expect that the other party had such a countermeasure. Although the anticoagulant did cause damage to Dickon as he expected, but judging from the situation, it would take hundreds of people to really kill the other party. It is only possible to inject 2 reagents at the same time. Now that the reagents have all been used up, facing Dickon's tricky regenerative healing factor, Chen Luo couldn't help but have a terrible headache. Is it the only option to leave? Thinking of this, Chen Luo's eyes were filled with unwillingness. Recalling the scenes of cutting off the opponent's body before, it is obvious that the opponent's regenerative healing factor must have some kind of inevitable connection with the blood, otherwise the anticoagulant just now would not have harmed it. If only there was a way to take the blood from the other party. Wait, blood. Liquid, there it is. As if thinking of something, Chen Luo's eyes suddenly lit up, his eyes flashed with excitement. He turned to look at Blade and said, Blade, let's try again. I think I have a way. Good. Hearing this, Blade was refreshed, and his tired body seemed to have a bit of vitality again. He clenched the long knife in his hand, gritted his teeth, and after a simple reply, he launched another attack. Damn it! Chen Luo, Blade, you all are going to die. Raising his head, Dickon looked at the two of them frantically. The killing intent in his eyes was completely undisguised. The blood in his hands surged, turned into 2 huge amounts of machetes, and slashed down towards Blade with all his strength. It's now. Just when the opponent was pinned down by Blade, Chen Luo had a thought, and the blood cup appeared in his hand again. Then, his figure flashed, and he turned into an afterimage again and rushed towards Dickon. Swish! The familiar cold light flashed across the neck of the other party, and the next moment, as the head fell again, the blood surging in the body appeared in front of Chen Luo's eyes. With a flick of his right hand, Chen Luo immediately returned to the original place after filling a large cup of blood. Immediately afterwards, as Chen Luo's thoughts turned, the blood in the cup was quickly refined by the blood cup, and as the blood in the cup decreased rapidly, the next moment, Dickon's roar sounded. Chen Luo, what did you do? It works. Hearing this roar, whether it was Chen Luo or Blade, there was a gleam of joy on their faces, and a gleam of hope once again appeared in their hearts. Chapter 41 Fall, the dust settles. Dickon stared at the blood cup in Chen Luo's hand. His eyes instantly became extremely gloomy. Although he didn't understand what Chen Luo did just now, at that moment just now, he clearly felt that part of the blood in his body disappeared inexplicably, and when he thought of what Chen Luo said just now, his heart suddenly with guesswork. After violently exerting both hands and knocking Blade back several meters, Dickon went uncharacteristically and did not attack again. Instead, he turned his head to look at the blood cup in Chen Luo's hand and asked in a deep voice, "What the hell are you holding in your hand?" For his question, Chen Luo had no intention of answering, quietly watching the blood in the cup gradually decrease, and finally slowly condensed into a bright red, translucent, crystal-like blood. Slowly came to Blade's side, handed over the blood cup in his hand. "Drink it. Do you want to replenish my energy? That's fine. Taking the blood cup, Blade drank it without any hesitation. Feeling the unique fragrance coming from his mouth, he subconsciously licked his lips and said, "The taste not bad, but it's a pity that there are too few of them." However, before he had time to savor it carefully, the next moment, a brand new power suddenly emerged in his body. Huh. This is. Feeling the new power in his body, Blade subconsciously looked at his hands, then turned to look at Chen Luo, his eyes full of doubts. Facing the other party's gaze, Chen Luo smiled, then looked at Dickon at the side and said, "Then, I'll leave him to you to deal with. How is it? Are you confident?" Hearing this, Blade was taken aback for a moment, then smiled confidently, with gleaming white teeth, and replied, "Definitely no problem." After saying this, he turned to look at Dickon, and Blade grinned. "Then, it's the second round." Dickon. As he said that, he held the knife forward again and slashed down with all his strength. "Humph. Do you think you are still my opponent now?" Dickon sneered disdainfully. Blood surged in his right hand, turned into a big knife again, and met him head-on without any hesitation. Click. The next moment, Dickon's smile became stiff in an instant, and he watched in disbelief that the opponent's long knife cut off his own in an instant, and then cut his body in half again without losing momentum. How is this possible? How did your strength increase so much? Looking at Blade in disbelief, Dickon asked with a gloomy face. But Blade didn't answer his thoughts. After making a contribution with one blow, Blade kept moving and launched an attack again. "Bastard!" Seeing this, Dickon immediately gave up the plan to ask, roared, and launched another attack. If it was because he was a little careless just now, he was hit by Blade, but after he got serious, the battle between the two fell into anxiety again. Although Blade's combat experience is much richer than the opponent's, but with the blessing of regenerative healing factor, Dickon is not afraid of his own injuries. Time is deadlocked, but not long after, taking advantage of a gap suddenly exposed during Blade's defense, Dickon's eyes lit up instantly. Under Blade's surprised gaze, the next moment, his right hand took the initiative to detach from his body and turned into a long spear. The knife stabbed straight into Blade's shoulder. Immediately afterwards, Dickon kept moving, controlled his right hand to swipe upwards, and then directly cut off Blade's left arm, and blood gushed out instantly. Seeing this scene, Dickon smiled even more. His eyes stared at Blade coldly, and the corners of his mouth slowly drew a curve. "Blade, it looks like we've already decided the outcome. I'll send you on your way right away. Don't worry, I'll send Chen Luo down to accompany you in a short time, so that you won't feel lonely on the other side of hell." "Oh, really? Dickon, take a closer look. We haven't decided the winner of this battle yet." Hearing this, Dickon sneered disdainfully and just spoke, but the next moment, when he saw the strange shape on Blade, his face suddenly changed. "This is regenerative healing factor? How could you have it too?" Dickon's face was full of disbelief, looking at the blood floating in the air at Blade's severed arm in front of him. Pulled by the blood, the severed arm quickly returned to its original position, and then began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. In a few seconds, it returned to its original state again. Regenerative healing factor? It's really a miraculous ability. Clenching his fist, Blade first gave a compliment, then looked in Dickon's direction again with a knife-like gaze, and grinned. "Then, let's continue." The next moment, Blade swung the long knife again, charging towards the opponent like a tiger. After knowing that he also has a regenerative healing factor like Dickon, Blade's offensive became much more violent in an instant, as if he was the same as the opponent, adopting the plan of exchanging injuries for injuries. Under his crazy attack, Dickon finally unable to hold on. His body was cut into several sections by Blade in an instant. Good chance. Chen Luo on the side saw this scene. His eyes shone slightly, and then he immediately started to act. The figure disappeared on the spot again, dragging a long afterimage, and came to Dickon's side in the blink of an eye, and then put all the exposed blood of the other party into the blood cup in just 1 second. Middle. As a large amount of blood disappeared, Dickon let out a painful cry instantly, and the part severed by Blade was struggling to move in the air. Wisps of blood mist slowly protruded from various parts of the body, pulling the body back together again. However, even if the body is pieced together, the healing speed of the severed part is not as good as before. Nearly half a minute has passed, and the injury has only healed less than half. Compared with the previous speed, it is undoubtedly a world of difference. Seeing the other party struggling to control his body to heal without any resistance, Blade waved the butcher knife again without any hesitation. Then, under Dickon's horrified gaze, with the flash of dozens of knives, his body was instantly cut into hundreds of sections by Blade, and then Chen Luo was not polite, and came to Dickon's side again, and will finally maintain Dickon. All the blood of life was taken away and put into the blood cup. After losing all his blood, Dickon didn't even have time to say the last word. His eyes lost their luster in an instant, and the severed body parts fell from the air in an instant, and then, under the gaze of the two, They were instantly wrapped in flames and turned into a mass of ashes. After seeing the other party's complete death, Chen Luo was relieved. Then, a familiar voice sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the selection. The reward is now issued. Chapter 42 Blade Joints. As the system prompt sounded and the reward was about to be distributed, Chen Luo suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said, "Wait a minute, can the reward be delayed for a while?" Now that the battle has just ended, Chen Luo just wants to take a good rest for a while, and now that there are other people around, it is not a good time to receive rewards, so Chen Luo suddenly had such an idea and asked tentatively. Ding! At the host's request, the rewards will be temporarily stored in the future for the host to extract by itself. Hearing this answer, Chen Luo immediately nodded in satisfaction. Now that Dickens' problem has been solved, Chen Luo turned his head to look at Blade. His heart moved, and when he was about to speak, the next moment, not far from the two of them, there was a sudden movement. Huh? Anyone else? Turning around in surprise, suddenly, a familiar figure appeared in front of the two of them. Not far from the two of them, Froey with a panicked face was fleeing towards the entrance of the hall at high speed. Seeing this scene, Chen Luo immediately gave up the idea of making a move. It was only at this time that he remembered that he had never seen Blade's biological mother since he met her when he first came here. If she hadn't appeared suddenly now, he might have already forgotten about her. Looking at the panicked appearance of the other party, I think that when they fought against Dickon just now, the other party should have been hiding in the dark to observe. Now after seeing Dickon's failure, he was afraid that he would be liquidated, and the fear in his heart made him feel like this general behavior. But it doesn't matter what happened to Chen Luo. After all, the other party is Blade's family matter. Regarding this kind of matter, it's better to leave it to Blade to handle it. As for him, he just needs to wait for the final result. I'll leave it to you here. I'll wait for you outside. After leaving this sentence, Chen Luo moved his feet and disappeared in place in an instant. Seeing Chen Luo's disappearing back, a look of gratitude flashed across Blade's face, and then he walked forward without stopping. A moment later, at the gate of the Palace of Eternal Night, looking at the slightly bright sky not far away, Chen Luo's eyes were full of nostalgia. It's been a while since I saw you, the familiar sunshine. Feeling the temperature from his palm, Chen Luo sighed with emotion, and then said with some regret, "It's just a pity. The scene in front of me looks really strange." Looking over the past, looking at the scene in front of him that seemed to be covered in a layer of blood, Chen Luo looked a little distressed. Just now, the blood cup had successfully transformed all of Dickon's blood. Chen Luo, who had long been curious about the power of the blood god, immediately swallowed it without hesitation. In the end, just as he thought, after drinking this cup of blood, he also successfully obtained the power of the blood god, and since then he has overcome his weaknesses such as sunlight, and became a Daywalker just like Blade. However, different from Blade, because of the influence of the blood god, although he no longer has the weakness of other vampires, the world in front of him has changed color since then, and all the scenes seem to be covered in blood. See, it's all bright red, which makes him very uncomfortable. Perhaps it was because his eyes were covered in blood, which led to this situation, but Chen Luo has no good solution to this, and finally can only hope for the rewards he got this time, hoping that in the integrate after taking the body of the Ghost King, he can eliminate this abnormality of himself. Picking up the sunglasses who didn't know who dropped them from the ground, he put them on, covering his blood-colored eyes. Looking at the same scene in front of him, Chen Luo sighed softly. "Have you run into any trouble?" At this time, a familiar voice sounded behind him, and then Blade slowly walked out from behind the door and came to Chen Luo's side. "Nothing." Shaking his head, Chen Luo turned his head to look at the other party, and after thinking for a moment, finally spoke slowly. "By the way, what are your plans next?" "As usual, continue with my work." Replying, Blade looked at Chen Luo with some doubts and asked, "Why? Look at you. Do you need to find me for something?" Chen Luo nodded, and then said, "Now that Dickon is gone, I plan to take over the power he left behind, then create a new family. How about it? Do you want to come to my place?" Blade was silent for a moment, then his eyes gradually became sharper, and he said word by word, "You will not forget. What on earth do I do? I will not let a vampire be a creature. Even if it's you, Chen Luo. If one day you let me know that a human being died at your hands, then I won't let you go." Seeing his stern look, Chen Luo waved his hands helplessly and said with a relaxed expression, "Don't be ridiculous. I won't do such a disgusting thing, and I don't intend to let other members of my family people do this kind of thing." As he spoke, Chen Luo flipped his palm, and the blood cup appeared in his hand again, and then explained, "As long as there is this blood cup, even if you don't go hunting in the future, vampires can still have a steady stream of blood. In this way, there is no need to be hostile to vampires, right?" Hearing this, Blade couldn't help showing surprise on his face. "You mean, this blood cup has the ability to produce blood? As long as there is enough water?" Chen Luo nodded, looked at the other party with an inexplicable smile on his face, Well, you should also understand that creatures like vampires can't be killed, especially vampires. Only rely on you few people. But if we can create a kingdom that rules all vampires, bring them all into management, and with the existence of blood cups, we don't have to worry about food, so we can curb their hunting of humans to the greatest extent. And even if one of the vampires violated the rules, you can get the news immediately, and it will be much more convenient to deal with than you are now. This method should be much more efficient than your aimless hunting of vampires these years, right? Hearing this, Blade's expression changed, and then he fell into deep thought. Seeing that he was already a little moved, Chen Luo rolled his eyes and immediately added fire to him. And if I remember correctly, your little girlfriend must have completed the transformation by now. You don't want them to go out to hunt humans in the future, do you? Or do you have the heart to shoot them? Hearing this, Blade woke up instantly. He was stunned for a moment, and then he couldn't help but look at Chen Luo angrily. What did you say? Did Whistler and the others become vampires too? Bastard, didn't you talk to Chen Luo like this before? I'm right. Hey, I just said that their lives are not in danger, but I didn't say that they were not bitten. Chen Luo spread his hands helplessly. Besides, with the existence of blood cups, you don't have to worry about them hunting humans in the future. Compared to letting them die, this is already the best result, isn't it? After hearing what Chen Luo said, Blade was immediately speechless. These words were like the last straw that overwhelmed him. After a fierce ideological struggle, Blade finally made a decision. Okay, you win. I agree to join. Just say it in advance. If I find out that you didn't do what you said, don't blame me for being rude. Don't worry, I won't give you this chance. With a smile on Chen Luo's face, he said confidently. Chapter 43 The Reward Arrives. The Body of the Ghost King. Afterwards, the two briefly negotiated some matters and decided to rest for one night first, and then start to act the next day. So after informing Blade of Karen's location, Chen Luo walked towards the house first. A few hours later, Chen Luo returned home, washed up briefly, and finally couldn't stand the exhaustion and fell asleep. At night, after resting for nearly half a day, Chen Luo finally opened his eyes again, stretched comfortably, then took out the blood cup, poured a cup of water into it, and after it was transformed into blood, Chen Luo drank it all in one gulp. Award. The Body of the Ghost King. I don't know what kind of changes it can bring me. Rubbing his hands together in anticipation, Chen Luo had a thought, called up the system, and chose to receive it. Ding! Is the host receiving the reward? Receive. The rewards have been distributed. Now integrate. As the sound of the system fell, the next moment, a warm current emerged from the body in an instant, and then quickly flowed through the whole body. Gradually, Chen Luo's muscles began to expand slowly, and the body of the normal person became stronger and stronger, slowly raising the height. The height finally stopped growing when it reached about 1.9 meters. Click. The cracking sound of the solid wood floor sounded, and as his physique changed, the density of Chen Luo's body also increased significantly, and his strength also skyrocketed. So just a slight force unconsciously caused such consequences. Finally, when the warm current in his body gradually subsided, Chen Luo opened his eyes again, and at the moment he just opened his eyes, Chen Luo's eyes suddenly lit up. Now the world before his eyes has returned to its original color, and the original color faded. Chen Luo came to the mirror and looked at it. When he saw his black pupils that had returned to their original form, he couldn't help but click with satisfaction. Nod. Looking at his figure in the mirror, Chen Luo is extremely satisfied. Compared with his previous thin figure, this appearance is more in line with his aesthetics. Judging from his current figure, even if he is comparable to Captain America, Thor is not weak in comparison. To be more precise, it is very similar to D'Chao from the universe next door. Trying to clench his fists, feeling the soaring power in his body, Chen Luo also became a little curious about his current situation, so he immediately called up the system panel and began to check. Ding! Panel loading complete. Host, Chen Luo. Race, Source Blood Clan. Strength, 50, 1 for a healthy adult male. Speed, 35. Spirit, 10. Physique, 50. Skills, Fighting Technique, High. Knife Technique, Master. Ability, Sucking Blood. Super Speed Regeneration, the speed of body healing is greatly improved. Blood Manipulation, integrate the awakening vampire technique of the Body of the Ghost King, which can control the blood in the target within a certain range and grow by sucking blood. Steel Body, integrate the passive blood ghost technique of awakening by the Body of the Ghost King grows by sucking blood. Assimilation, transforming the target into the same race as oneself by giving one's own blood. Bloodline source, the same race is immortal, the ancestor is immortal. Evaluation, as the source of the new race, you still have a long way to go. After reading the introduction in the panel, Chen Luo was full of surprises. Judging from the attributes displayed on the previous panel, he has now achieved huge amounts of growth, probably because of the influence of the passive ability of the Man of Steel, which has caused his strength and physique to increase beyond the speed attribute and reach the level of ordinary people. 50 times the terrifying number. If an ordinary person's strength is 200 catties, then Chen Luo's strength has reached about 5 tons. Although such strength is still not ranked among the powerful in this world, it is already a number that ordinary people can hardly reach. In terms of physique, with his current body density, Chen Luo believes that he probably already has the ability to resist bullets. Although he is not confident that he can resist firearms with super high penetrating power like sniper rifles, but he has been able to ignore weapons like pistols. With super strength, super defense, and terrifying speed, it can be said that Chen Luo's strength has been greatly improved, especially in this era when superheroes have not yet appeared. It is no exaggeration to say, he has already stood at the apex of the world. Even if there are still mutants in this world, except for a few mutants like Magneto and the Professor, it is difficult for others to pose a threat to him. In addition to the improvement in strength, it also brought him huge amounts of surprises in terms of survival. The original self-healing has now been covered by super speed regeneration. According to the above introduction, it is conceivable that this ability is definitely much stronger than self-healing. With his current resilience, he might be like the Ghost in Ghost Slayer. Even if an arm is cut off, it can grow back in a few seconds, which is an exaggeration to the extreme. Then there is the introduction of this bloodline source ability. Although Chen Luo is a little unclear from the above introduction, but according to the literal meaning, that is, as long as his race exists in this world, then as the source of this race, he is never die. Thinking about this ability, it should be the so-called special reward. This kind of ability may not be as strong as the naked eye that can be seen by the naked eye like Oniwu Suji in the world of Ghost Slayer, who splits the body into more than 1,800 pieces in an instant. As long as any piece escapes, it can be restored. This ability may be even more unsolvable. After all, the resilience of the former is traceable, but not the latter. Although he still doesn't understand the principle, if he thinks right, even if his body is completely destroyed, as long as there are other members of the same race, then he will not die completely. Such ability already exists as a concept. With such an ability, as long as Chen Luo can create more of his own kind, theoretically speaking, he will no longer have the risk of death. Thinking of this, Chen Luo immediately felt better. After realizing that his strength had grown tremendously, he was even more eager to try tomorrow's action. Under this seemingly peaceful city, soon there will be waves again. Chapter 44 The New Boss, Chen Luo. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, a month has passed. A month ago, Chen Luo brought Blade to the entrance of Paradise Bar. After announcing the news of Dickon's death, he then proposed to create a new family. However, there is only one prerequisite for joining his family, which is to stop hunting humans in the future. Kill. Hearing this news, although they were shocked as to why Blade chose to join Chen Luo's side, what made everyone even more angry was Chen Luo's request. As vampires, it is their nature to suck blood, and hunting humans is the instinctive reaction of most vampires. It is even more difficult for them to restrain this instinct. So it was no surprise that most of the vampires present rejected his proposal without even thinking about it. But to Chen Luo's surprise, Kasong and several of his vampires accepted his proposal. He is also very optimistic about Kasong Chen Luo. With his ability, he is also one of the best in the Forster family. With the expansion of the power of the family he created in the future, the other party's ability is also what he needs urgently. Therefore, this time Chen Luo came here. Soliciting the other party to join was his main purpose. Now that Kasong has agreed, it doesn't matter whether other people agree or not. He just wants to take this opportunity to test how far his strength has grown. So the next moment, Chen Luo started a bloody slaughter. In less than a minute, except for Blade Casson and a few people who survived in the bar, nearly 300 other vampires were all reduced to ashes and scattered in the air. Seeing the power displayed by Chen Luo in this battle, Kasong and the others were immediately shocked. Their eyes were full of fear, and at the same time they were very grateful for their previous choice. If they had rejected Chen Luo's invitation before, what was waiting for them might be the same fate as the group of vampires who were still alive and kicking just now. And after seeing Chen Luo's performance today, Blade was even more shocked, because in his opinion, the strength Chen Luo showed today was several grades stronger than when he played against Deacon yesterday, which is already far away. More than he can handle. If he faced Chen Luo before, he still had the confidence to use his sword skills to resist for a period of time, but if it were now, he would be defeated by the opponent without any suspense in just one face-to-face encounter. There is absolutely no room for resistance. Seeing such an exaggerated increase in Chen Luo's strength in just one day, this made Blade very puzzled, and Chen Luo had no intention of explaining it to him. After all, whether it is the existence of the system or the effect of the blood cup that can steal other people's abilities, these are Chen Luo's trump cards and must not be disclosed to others. I talked to Blade about some of the abilities of the blood cup. These are what he wants to show to the world in the future. After all, he wants his family's vampires to stop hunting humans, so he also needs to have the ability to make blood. Let them know, otherwise it will be difficult to explain the source of these foods. Then there is another ability of the blood cup. After drinking the target's blood, he possesses the target's ability for a short period of time. This ability Chen Luo will reveal in front of other people sooner or later, so it is impossible to hide it. Although this ability is also very powerful, but because of the time limit, it is not to the point where those big bosses are tempted, and as long as they don't attack him, then he can be regarded as safe. After this battle, Chen Luo's terrifying power instantly spread throughout the vampire world, and for a while, all vampires were terrified. What made all the vampires panic all day long was still behind, and less than the next day, Chen Luo immediately announced that he would wipe out all the vampire forces in New York, as long as the vampires in this city would join him. Otherwise, he will attack together with Blade and destroy his humanity. Such arrogant remarks were naturally dissatisfied by many vampire forces, including the 12 clans with some forces here. On the second day after the news came out, many forces immediately jumped out and expressed their desire to give them both a good look. Naturally, Chen Luo would not be used to them. That night, the two came to the other party's camp, rushed into the crowd, and started a bloody massacre. In just one night, more than a dozen forces in succession were approached by the two of them. Under the overwhelming strength of the two, it was almost as if they were destroyed. Except for a small number of vampires who chose to join the Chen Luo family, most of them died in the hands of two people, and the number of vampires who died at the hands of the two of them that night reached an astonishing 2,000. You must know that the number of vampires in this city is about 10,000, and just this night, the two slaughtered 1/5 of them. If this continues, I'm afraid that within a few days, all the vampires in this city will be slaughtered by the two of them. After this night of fighting, the two of Chen Luo and Blade could be considered famous, especially for Chen Luo. Unlike Blade, Chen Luo, who debuted less than a month ago, was known by everyone because of his 1-to-100 deeds, but when it comes to popularity, he is still much worse than Blade. But after this night, the situation was completely reversed, and the reason was very simple, that is, Chen Luo killed too many people that night. Of the more than 2,000 vampires, nearly 1,500 died in the hands of Chen Luo. Such a terrifying killing efficiency is worthy of the name of a butcher. Thus, in just one night, the name of the butcher Chen Luo suddenly resounded throughout the underground world, and even heard of it in the other two vampire kingdoms on the other side of the ocean. It can be described as a fierce reputation. After this night of bloody killings, the vampire forces that were dancing happily fell silent. Under the threat of Chen Luo's vicious name, they ran away and fled to other cities one after another. Under such circumstances, after about a month, finally, after all the vampire forces were wiped out, there was only one vampire force left in the city. And within this month, after digesting all the resources and connections left by the vampire forces, Chen Luo also became the new boss of the city, and he was very prosperous for a while. Chapter 45 Encounter, The Future Iron Man. A week later, Las Vegas. At night, the city is shrouded in brilliant and colorful lights, reflecting it as if it were daytime. There are many high-rise buildings on both sides of the street, and pedestrians come and go in and out of it. Every nightclub, hotel, restaurant, and even a casino was surrounded by raging crowds, waving the banknotes in their hands, wantonly venting their desires. As the famous city that never sleeps, it is visited by tourists from all over the world all year round. When you walk into a casino or a shopping mall, you can meet the rich and powerful people who can only be seen in the reports from time to time. It was as if inside this royal casino, Chen Luo saw an extremely familiar figure just as soon as he entered the door. Wow, you've won again. That's great, Tony. It's all because of you, a beautiful woman, by my side that I can have such good luck. Take it, you deserve it. Among the crowd, in front of a huge amount of gambling table, a man with a height of about 185, brown hair, and a somewhat unrestrained look was standing in the center of the crowd, wearing loose casual clothes, holding a wine glass in one hand, holding a chip in the other hand. He shoved it towards a blonde woman with a sexy figure beside her. Seeing this scene, the crowd became lively again, and the discussion of people on the side rang out. Mr. Tony is really too generous. This is a $100,000 chip, and he gave it away so casually. He really deserves to be a billionaire. Damn it, I really envy him. Why does this guy have beauties of this level by his side everywhere? Why can't I find it? Are you thinking too much? He is the chairman of the Stark Group. He is young and rich, and the most important thing is that he is single. How can such a man not be liked by beautiful women? If you want to compare with him, you can't find him. Are you comfortable? And he is one of the few super geniuses in the world. How many weapon designs of the Stark Group are from Tony now? Such a genius should be liked by beautiful women, right? While everyone was discussing, feeling the temperature from the back of Tony's hand, the beauty's smile became even wider, and the eyes she looked at each other became more eager. As for the gaze cast by the other party, Tony had long been familiar with it, smiled slightly, and silently thought about which hotel he should spend the night in tonight. Looking at the back of the other party, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he suddenly became interested. He really didn't expect that after initially integrating his own forces, because of the need to integrate the resources and connections left by the previous vampire forces, it happened that a congressman who was closely connected with the vampire side was here on vacation these days. So Chen Luo, so I decided to come here to discuss cooperation matters with the other party. The matter was discussed very smoothly, and in less than an hour, the two parties had already reached a cooperation. After the cooperation was reached, Chen Luo was finally free. He happened to be very interested in this city that never sleeps, so he decided to go out for a stroll alone. However, he just randomly picked a casino and walked in, but he didn't expect to meet the famous Iron Man in the future, which was beyond his expectation. Judging from the current time, there are still about 10 years before Iron Man's official debut. Today's Tony Stark is only in his early 30s, full of mature charm, but also a little more vitality. Now that they have met, Chen Luo has no reason to turn a blind eye, so after thinking for a while, he stepped forward decisively and came to the gambling table. Now the game played on this table is also very simple. It is simply comparing the file size. The dealer shakes the dice cup in his hand, and other people judge the file size. This kind of rule just meets Chen Luo's wishes. Having come into contact with these, such a simple and rough gameplay definitely fits his heart better. I don't know if it's luck or some other reason. Since Tony came to this gambling table, he has successfully bet 9 times in a row. The chips have gone from 1 million to tens of millions. Shocked by Tony's performance, they gathered around one after another. Suddenly, the gaming table became extremely lively. Taking out the $10,000 chip that was exchanged when he first entered here, Chen Luo followed the example of others and bet on it. But unlike most of the others, the position he bet on was completely opposite. Someone next to him saw Chen Luo's actions and kindly reminded him, "My friend, Tony's luck is very strong now, and everyone else is betting big like Tony, and you are going against them. Aren't you afraid of losing?" To this, Chen Luo just smiled and said, "I'm just playing around." Hearing this, the man didn't say anything more. Soon, under the eager gaze of everyone, the dealer slowly uncovered the dice cup. When everyone saw the numbers inside, the next moment, there were constant exclamations. It turned out to be small. Tony lost. But it's not surprising, after all. Tony has won 9 games in a row, and it's normal to lose once. Damn it. If I had known earlier, I should have bet on the small number. Just now I felt that the number should be small. Not only the others, but even Tony, who was originally smiling, was taken aback for a moment. But soon he came back to his senses, thinking that it was just a coincidence, smiled indifferently, and then waited for the next round to start. However, what he didn't expect was that in the next 9 games in a row, he didn't win even one game. When the result of the last game came out, he not only lost all the tens of millions he won just now, on the contrary, he lost tens of millions of dollars on this basis. Although such a loss of tens of millions is nothing to him, but the ending of 10 consecutive defeats made him, who has always been proud, suddenly turned dark and stared intently at the gambler on the opposite side of the gambling table. The figures seemed to be deeply engraved in his mind. Chapter 46 Betting. Wait a moment. After winning a small win over the future Iron Man, Chen Luo had no intention of continuing, so he immediately prepared to leave. However, he had just walked a few steps when there was a sudden sound of footsteps behind him, followed by a familiar voice. Slowly turning around and looking behind, Chen Luo asked with a smile, "Is there a problem?" Tony didn't speak, and first looked Chen Luo up and down calmly. His heroic face, his unique black hair and black pupils exude a unique oriental charm, and even though he is wrapped in a suit, it is hard to conceal his strong physique like an ancient Greek sculpture. Even if he is as proud as he is, I have to admit that the man in front of me has a powerful attraction no less than his. Regarding this point, it can be seen from the small movements of the beauty next to Tony that are visible to the naked eye. Unconsciously, she glanced at Chen Luo, and the beauty's eyes were a little annoyed, obviously regretting that she hadn't met Chen Luo before. After looking at Chen Luo for a moment, Tony stretched out his right hand and said confidently, Tony Stark." Chen Luo. Reaching out to shake hands with the other party, Chen Luo showed a smile on his face and said, "I don't think you need to introduce yourself. After all, I don't think anyone doesn't know your face." Hearing this, Tony didn't refute at all. He nodded naturally, and then said, "I think so too." Chen Luo. Just when Chen Luo was feeling speechless, Tony stared at him closely and said, "You cheated in the game just now, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't believe that you could win so many games in a row. Who knows?" In this regard, Chen Luo smiled noncommittally, looked at the other party, and said with an unclear smile on his face, "However, I don't think you should have the position to criticize me. You have won so many consecutive wins before, you should. It's not just luck, okay?" "Well?" Tony's face froze, and he was speechless for a moment. Seeing the other party's reaction, Chen Luo also had a guess in his heart, but he didn't mean to point it out. After all, it was only tens of millions. This number was nothing more than that to them. A little money is just a drop in the bucket, and in the bet just now, The reason why Chen Luo was able to win all the time was thanks to his blood control ability. Through this ability, Chen Luo controls the blood in his body to turn into an imperceptible thread, enters the dice cup, and changes the points of the dice by controlling the thread, so that he can achieve the effect he wants. Although the scope of control is limited due to the low spiritual attribute, as long as there is a system, I believe there is no chance of improving it in the future. I believe that when the spiritual attribute is strong enough in the future, the blood control ability must be large enough shine. Looking at the other party, Chen Luo nodded lightly and said, "So if you have nothing else to do, then I'll go first." Wait a moment. Hearing this, Tony subconsciously opened his mouth to dissuade. Although he didn't know what method the opponent used to win him, but the feeling of losing undoubtedly made him very unhappy, so he planned to compare with Chen Luo to regain his position. Looking around, suddenly, he seemed to have discovered something, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Then he turned his head, raised his eyebrows at Chen Luo, and said with a smile, "Since we all cheated just now, how about we have a fair game?" "Oh." Chen Luo showed a smile of interest on his face and said, "How do you want to compare?" Hearing this, a confident smile appeared on the corner of Tony's mouth. Then he stretched out his hand and pointed to the side, saying, "It's very simple, then let's compare. Who can invite that lady to dinner, how about it?" Following the direction pointed by the other party, Chen Luo turned his head to look. When he saw clearly who Tony was referring to, he subconsciously raised his eyebrows, and then there was an inexplicable smile on his face. After thinking for a while, Chen Luo turned his head to look at the beautiful woman next to him, and asked curiously, "Tony, if you do this, what should the beautiful woman next to you do?" "Huh." Tony was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look around. When he saw the stiff face of the beautiful woman beside him, he instantly became a little embarrassed. Just now, he was only thinking about winning with Chen Luo. As for the beautiful woman beside him, he had long forgotten about it. After thinking for a while, Tony then lowered his head and said something in the other's ear, which left Chen Luo stunned. I saw that the other party became happy at a speed visible to the naked eye. His face flushed with excitement, and he kissed Tony on the face with joy, then turned and left. "How did you do it?" Looking at this scene, Chen Luo couldn't help asking curiously. "Easy." Tony smiled at him and said, "As compensation, I gave her the sports car parked outside the hotel." "You are amazing." Hearing this answer, Chen Luo was silent for a long time, and finally extended his thumb slowly. As soon as this man's highest recognition came out, Tony seemed to become a little more complacent, and at the same time, he also had a little more affection for Chen Luo for no reason. "How about it? Do you accept my proposal just now?" "No problem." Chen Luo nodded, then thought of something and asked with a smile, "But since we have made a bet, then we have to bet something, right? Otherwise, it seems meaningless." "That's right." Tony nodded in agreement, and then said, "Then tell me, what do you want to bet on?" Chen Luo thought for a moment, and suddenly his eyes lit up and he suggested, "I think, why not just bet on a dinner?" "What are you talking about? You want to have dinner with me?" "No, no, no." Upon hearing this, Tony's expression changed immediately, and he looked at Chen Luo with full of guard. I said, "Are you thinking wrong?" Seeing his reaction, Chen Luo immediately understood, rolled his eyes angrily, and said helplessly, "What I mean is, if anyone loses, please invite the other party. A dinner. But there is a premise that the meal must be cooked by the loser himself. How about this bet? Do you accept it?" That sounds interesting." Tony touched his chin with interest, and then agreed decisively, "Okay, then it's decided." After confirming the bet, Tony turned his head to look at the target he had chosen, eager to try. "How about it? Let's start now. Who will go first? Shall we flip a coin?" "No need. You go first." Chen Luo shook his head and looked at the other party confidently. "Anyway, you will never succeed." "Huh? So confident? Then don't regret it." Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Tony was also aroused with arrogance in his heart, and immediately walked towards the goal in front of him without looking back. Chapter 47. Nissa's Request. After walking a few steps, Tony has already come to the other side. First raised his eyebrows at Chen Luo behind him, then picked up the wine glass on the plate of the passing waiter with ease, handed it to the other party, and then said, "This beautiful lady, may I have the honor to invite you to have dinner with me?" After speaking, Tony showed a smile that he thought was charming. Tony has absolute confidence in whether the beauty in front of him will agree to his invitation, and he also has such self-confident capital. After all, with his conditions, he is absolutely attractive to the opposite sex. He is young and rich, coupled with the super genius personality, which makes him have a different kind of charm. With his conditions, he really couldn't think of the possibility of being rejected. However, just when he was full of confidence, the next moment, the other party's answer made him slap in the face instantly. "Sorry, I'm not free." The smile on Tony's face froze for a moment. He looked at the other person in disbelief, pointed to his own face and asked, "Don't you know who I am?" The other party raised his head, glanced at Tony, and then said, I know, but so what? Hearing the repulsive tone of the other party, Tony's face froze, and then he continued to ask, Madam, what is your name? Nissa. Miss Nissa, I think you haven't gotten to know me well, I think. Just when Tony was about to fight for another one, Nissa interrupted mercilessly. Mr. Tony, you don't need to waste any more time. We are really not suitable. You should invite other people. As soon as these words came out, Tony's original draft was useless. The current situation is already obvious. The other party has no interest in him at all, let alone agree to be with him. He had dinner with him. It doesn't matter if he is rejected at other times and places. After all, there are so many beauties in this world. If this one doesn't work, just replace it with another one. There is nothing to be sorry about. But at this time, after making a bet with Chen Luo in advance, he would not accept it anyway if he was to let him just give up. Although judging from the opponent's performance, even if Chen Luo comes here, there is a great risk of failure. But this risk is uncontrollable, and he doesn't want to pin his victory or defeat on this uncertainty. Driven by a strong desire to win, Tony's brain began to run at a high speed, and soon, he seemed to think of something, and suddenly his eyes lit up. With an idea in mind, Tony rolled his eyes, then quickly lowered his head, approached the other party's ear, and whispered, Miss Nisha, I will consider you doing me a favor this time. I made a bet just now on who can successfully invite you to dinner. As long as you help me win this bet, I promise I won't pester you in the future. And in return, I will pay you $10 million as a gift. What do you think? Bet? Can you tell me who it is? Hearing this, Nisha, who was originally impatient, suddenly became interested and asked curiously, It's over there. Looking in the direction Tony pointed, when she saw Chen Luo's figure not far away, Nisha was startled for a moment, and then suddenly revealed a look of surprise. Chen Luo. With a subconscious exclamation, Nisha quickly walked towards Chen Luo's direction, leaving Tony alone in place. Seeing the back of the other party leaving, Tony was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly reacted. His face changed. No, they actually know each other. Then this time, am I going to lose the bet? Seeing the other party come to Chen Luo's side, and the scene where the two were chatting with laughter, his face turned dark immediately, and he called out bad luck in his heart. On the other side, looking at Nisha walking towards this side, Chen Luo raised his glass with a smile, touched her, and said with a smile, Haven't seen you for a long time. The two laughed and chatted for a while. Looking at Chen Luo in front of them, Nisha's eyes moved slightly. She didn't know what she thought of. She smiled and said, I really didn't expect that you had time to come here to play. If I remember correctly, you should be very busy recently, right? After all, your family has just been established, but there are still many things waiting for you to deal with woolen cloth. Hearing this, Chen Luo narrowed his eyes slightly, then nodded helplessly, and said, That's true. There have been a lot of things going on recently, and I came here today with one thing to deal with, but it's been dealt with now. It just so happened that I didn't do it before. Been here, so just wanted to wander around. After saying this, Chen Luo looked at the other party, smiled, and then said, But I really didn't expect to meet you here. Hearing Chen Luo's words, Nisha's face was a little surprised. That's a coincidence. I came here to deal with some family affairs, and I plan to have fun here for a few days, but I didn't expect that at home something else is wrong, so I'm afraid I'm leaving tomorrow. Is that so? Chen Luo nodded suddenly, looked at Tony who had been looking this way frequently not far away, and raised a slight arc at the corner of his mouth and said, Since you are leaving tomorrow, let's have dinner together tonight. How about dinner? I will do it for you. Oh, really? Seeing Chen Luo's serious appearance, Nisha couldn't help but smile and said, Are you sure you didn't want to win the bet? Huh. Chen Luo's face froze, and he quickly realized that he gritted his teeth and asked, Tony told you? That's right. Nisha nodded, and then said, It's not just your bet. He also told me that if I agree to have dinner with him, he will give me 10 million as a reward. This old six. Chen Luo cursed inwardly. The smile on his face suddenly became a little stiff, and was about to say something to relieve the embarrassment. At this moment, Nisha spoke again. It's not impossible to promise you. However, you have to do me a favor. Huh? What's the matter? I want to invite you to the North Bear country. My family has encountered a problem there and needs to find a strong enough helper to help. Nisha looked at Chen Luo seriously, her eyes full of expectation. I think if it is you, you can definitely help us solve it. And as long as you are willing to help, I can promise you that the Moschino's family will be your most reliable ally in the future. If you encounter any problems in the future, although you can come to us for help. Moschino's? Hearing this name, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and then under the expectant gaze of the other party, he nodded slowly and said with a smile, It seems that my dinner is not cheap. Seeing his reaction, Nisha couldn't help but smile. Her eyes were full of gratitude, and at the same time she had a great affection for Chen Luo in her heart. Then let's go and say hello to Tony first. Afterwards, Chen Luo walked slowly towards Tony. P.S. Ask for a wave of data. Thank you everyone. Chapter 48. The Blood Alliance Squad. Coming to Tony, seeing his stiff face, Chen Luo had a different smile on his face. Tony, it looks like I won. Hearing this, Tony looked at Chen Luo, Nisha who also had a smile on her face, and said indignantly, damn it, it's not fair. I didn't know you guys knew each other before. Oh. Chen Luo raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, if you say that, is someone planning to renege on his debt? As soon as these words came out, Tony's face flushed instantly, and he held back for a long time, wanting to admit it, but the pride in his heart didn't allow him to do so. After all, he decides the game, and even the target is chosen by him himself. Although he didn't expect Chen Luo to know each other, this is also the luck of the opponent, and in his opinion, luck is also a kind of strength. Therefore, even though he was still dissatisfied in his heart, he had to admit that he had indeed lost the bet just now. Thinking of this, Tony is not someone who can afford to lose, so he nodded decisively. Okay, it seems that I lost. But regarding our bet, it seems that it will be delayed for a while. I think I still need some time to practice Let's Cook. There's no need to worry about it. Chen Luo shook his head and said, it happens that Nisha and I have something to deal with these few days, so let's talk about it when I come back. Hearing this, Tony looked at the two suspiciously, and after a long time, he nodded understandingly, and said with an inexplicable smile, understood. Since you have other activities, I won't bother you. Hope you guys have fun. After saying this, Tony exchanged contact information with Chen Luo, then turned and left with a smile on his face. On the way to leave, Tony couldn't help recalling Chen Luo's figure like an ancient Greek sculpture in his mind, and couldn't help feeling a little envious. Damn it, Chen Luo has such good physical strength. It takes several days to deal with a thing. No, I can't lose to him. It seems that I will start exercising in the future. Looking at the back of Tony leaving, recalling what the other party said just now, Chen Luo was a little stunned, shook his head helplessly, and said with a smile, is this guy thinking wrong? I think so too. Nisha's smile on the side remained undiminished, but when she glanced at Chen Luo, there was a faint hint of something different. Later, during the dinner with the other party, Chen Luo asked Nisha about some relevant information, and Chen Luo got up and left, planning to go back to New York to explain the matter, so that the base camp would not fall into chaos after he left. After settling down, meet with the other party. Soon, 2 days later, Chen Luo, who had taken care of everything, got on the plane on time and flew towards his destination. In the middle of the night, as soon as Chen Luo got off the airport, when he came to the exit, he saw Nisha, who had been waiting for a long time, waving to him beside a limousine. Chen Luo stepped forward and got in the car. Under Nisha's introduction, Chen Luo also understood the destination of their trip. So, in order to deal with this enemy, you have also formed a special hunting team? Yes, Mr. Chen Luo. In the driver's seat, a man with a strong figure and a capable look all over his body responded while driving. He is the overall person in charge of this cleanup operation phrase, as the master of the Vampire Empire in the North Bear Kingdom, the right-hand man of Eli Moschino's, and also the captain of this team called the Blood League, responsible for leading the team assisted Chen Luo to act together. At this time, Nisha, who was on the side, suddenly explained, actually, the members of the Blood Alliance team have been undergoing secret training before, and the mutants have not appeared at that time, but at that time, we were to deal with another person. A gleam of light flashed in Chen Luo's eyes, and he said with a smile, the person you mentioned couldn't be Blade? That's right. It's Blade. Nisha nodded. She didn't know what to think of. She looked at Chen Luo with a hint of surprise in her eyes. But we didn't expect that the famous Daywalker would choose to join your camp is really incredible. Actually, it's nothing. Chen Luo shrugged and replied, I just gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. Oh, can you tell me? Nisha looked at him curiously. If you have a chance, you will know. Chen Luo waved his hand and didn't say much. Seeing this, Nisha didn't ask any more questions and changed the subject naturally. While chatting with the two, Chen Luo fell into deep thought. The reason why he agreed to Nissa's invitation and came here to help was not only because of the friendship of this family. If his guess is correct, what the family is facing now should be the plot of the second Blade. If it is what it thinks, then taking advantage of this opportunity, it is not impossible for him to get involved in the vampire forces that occupy the whole country. It seems that I have to find a chance to meet him. Chen Luo's eyes flickered, and he suddenly had an idea in his mind. Just when the three of them drove to the base. On the other side, inside an abandoned factory, various training facilities are displayed inside, and in a certain corner, on a large arena, there are two tall men who look like beasts fighting fiercely. Come on, Light Axe, kill this guy Lois Hart. Come on, Wylian. The two of them have competed many times. Have you ever seen a Light Axe win? I think she is just dazzled by love. Otherwise, she wouldn't say such stupid things. Lois Hart is about to win. Sure enough, as the snowman's voice fell, the next moment, the winner was also decided in the arena. Boom! A powerful and heavy punch hit Guangshua's chest, instantly breaking several ribs on the spot, and his body flew upside down for several meters, and then lay heavily on the ground, coughing up blood from his mouth. Seeing that Light Axe was defeated again, except for Snowman, the other 3 people in the audience sighed in disappointment. Haha, I've said it a long time ago. I'm the strongest. On the ring, Lois Hart laughed arrogantly. His voice was deafening. Seeing his arrogant face, the blonde man under the stage couldn't help curling his lips, touched the snowman beside him and said, Snowman, Lois Hart is very arrogant. Why? You don't plan to go up to him, Trick? Hearing this, the only Asian man among the 6 people in the audience shook his head, as if he remembered something, and a trace of curiosity flashed in his eyes. Compared to this, I care more about the butcher who is coming. I don't know what kind of person he will be. As soon as these words came out, the reactions of the other 5 people were also different. Chapter 49 Provocation, Chen Luo's Killing Intent. The butcher. I heard that he was a terrifying person who killed thousands of vampires in one night. Even the legendary vampire hunter, Blade, joined his camp. I think such a person must be terrifyingly powerful, Cupa said in amazement. Hee. At this moment, the pastor at the side suddenly sneered and said with disdain, That's just a rumor from the outside world. Do you really believe that someone can slaughter thousands of people in one night? You must know that there are thousands of vampires, but they are not as weak as humans. How could it be possible for only one person to kill them all? Do you really think he is a god? Then what do you mean by that rumor? I think he should bring his own men to mobilize his hands, and after killing everyone, he will take the credit for himself. Hee. I have seen many people like this. I think this butcher is no more than it's nothing more than hypocrisy. I don't believe anyone can be so strong. Guang Axe, who had recovered a little from his injury, stood up again and expressed his opinion. Needless to say, Wei Lian on the side is completely ruthless. The butcher? What a great name. When he comes here, I want to see if he is really as strong as the rumors say. Lois Hart clenched her fist and made a crackling sound, and said with a grim smile. Seeing everyone's reaction, Snowman frowned and wanted to say something, but in the end he forcibly held back. Rumors about Chen Luo emerged in his mind. It is said that the other party, like him, is of Asian origin. Such an identity among the vampires are also pitifully few. It may be based on the sense of recognition in this aspect, which made him look forward to meeting Chen Luo in the future. Not long after, with the roar of an engine coming from outside the factory, several people were instantly refreshed. Coming. As expected, they didn't make them wait long, and then 3 figures slowly opened the door and walked towards them. They were naturally very familiar with 2 of the figures, but it was the first time they had seen the 3rd figure. He is the legendary butcher? With curiosity, the eyes of several people swept towards Chen Luo. With a tall and strong figure, the rumored Asian complexion, and the heroic and handsome face, compared with the legendary murderous butcher, Chen Luo who caught their eyes was more like an ancient noble prince. There is no threat at all. Seeing this, it seemed that his conjecture was confirmed. Except for the snowman, the eyes of the other 5 people all flashed a trace of contempt. Even Chupa, who originally had some respect for Chen Luo, couldn't help muttering to himself, wondering if the other party was really as bad as others said. When he came to the 6 people, Fraser looked at them seriously and said, This is Mr. Chen Luo who came here to help us. Mr. Chen Luo is fully responsible for this cleanup operation, and my duty is to fully cooperate with Mr. Chen Luo's actions, understand? Hearing this, the 6 people looked at each other in blank dismay, all silent. Regarding this, Chen Luo didn't show the slightest expression on his face. Instead, he looked at them with great interest. These people are also characters who have appeared in the plot, and each of them has extraordinary skills. If those mutants are not so contagious, even vampires can be infected. Otherwise, there would not be so many casualties. In the end, only one person survived. So for these elite vampires, if possible, Chen Luo also wants to absorb them into his forces. Definitely, the premise is that they abide by the rules he made at the beginning. If anyone wants to provoke him, he doesn't mind teaching them a lesson. After a moment of silence, finally, Guang Fu, who had the most fiery personality, couldn't help but speak first. Phrase, I think our strength is enough to deal with those bastards. Why do we need other people to help? This sentence was like a fuse, and immediately aroused the resonance of other people. I also think that only us are enough. What butcher? I think this name is blown up by other people. If we really want to fight, it's not certain who will win, right? The priest in the crowd gave Chen Luo a disdainful look, and snorted heavily, his face full of provocation. Priest, what are you talking about? Chen Luo is me? Nisha's face was suddenly full of anger. A cold light flashed in her eyes. She stared at the other party, and was about to say something, but was caught by Chen Luo. Luo interrupted with a wave. Oh, if you say that, it seems that you want to fight against me? Hearing this, Chen Luo smiled slightly, then waved his hand and said, If that's the case, then come and try. After saying this, Chen Luo turned to Nisha and asked curiously, Nissa, I want to ask you something. If I accidentally killed this guy, it shouldn't have any effect, right? As soon as these words came out, everyone's expressions changed. What did you say? The pastor's eyes turned red instantly. With murderous intent surging in his heart, he looked straight at Chen Luo and said with a grin, Okay, then let me see. How did you kill me? Seeing his reaction, Fraser, who originally wanted to dissuade him, immediately stopped his movements and said nothing. In fact, he was also very curious about Chen Luo's strength. Since someone took the initiative to test him, he also wanted to take this opportunity to see. Definitely, while preparing to watch the battle, he is also well prepared, and no matter which side shows signs of failure, he will promptly rescue them. Not to mention Nisha on the other side. After all, Chen Luo was invited by her personally. Since the other party dared to provoke Chen Luo, it would undoubtedly have slapped her in the face. Therefore, even if Chen Luo didn't do it himself, she would have already given it to her. The other party sentenced to death. So, the two came to the ring in front of them. Looking at the two people on the stage, everyone in the audience immediately talked about it. Look at this battle. Who can win? I'm optimistic about the priest. We all know his strength. I think he can definitely win. Guangfu said with certainty. I think it might be a tie. After all, the opponent can make such a big name, and his skills should not be weak. Chupa said with some uncertainty. No matter who wins, it won't be my opponent. Lois Hart crossed her arms, her fierce face full of confidence. Just as everyone was discussing, the next moment, the snowman's voice sounded. I think you are still planning to collect the priest's body. This battle, he will lose. Chapter 50 Bloody Shock. As soon as these words came out, everyone opened their eyes wide and looked at each other in disbelief. Snowman, you bastard, don't you have a fever? How dare you talk such nonsense? I said you don't believe him because he has the same skin color as you? If that's the case, then you trust the wrong person. The pastor will be killed? Do you have any basis? You have the confidence to make such a judgment. Ignoring the cynicism of the people around him, Snowman's eyes looked straight in the direction of Chen Luo without moving. Before he transformed into a vampire, he was a master of martial arts who had practiced for decades. Even in the human period, his hands were covered with blood. Therefore, he was far more sensitive to the perception of murderous intent than other vampires. As for Chen Luo, although he concealed this murderous aura very well, he could still sense a trace of it, and just this ray of murderous aura made him shudder. It is conceivable that he died in the opponent's hands. The number of people is definitely much more than he imagined. Is this the legendary butcher? Feeling the murderous aura coming from Chen Luo, Snowman's eyes unconsciously showed a trace of awe. As for the thoughts in Shu Aaron's heart at this moment, everyone knew nothing about it. On the ring, Chen Luo slowly took off the coat he was wearing, then took out the gloves from his pocket and put them on his hands leisurely. Seeing Chen Luo's series of inexplicable movements, the priest at the side finally couldn't bear it and asked, Hey, what are you doing? Why don't you do it? Don't worry, Chen Luo replied while wearing gloves, although it won't take a few seconds to solve you, but my clothes are very expensive and I don't want to be stained with blood. As for why you wear gloves, maybe it's because it's cleaner. After all, if your hands are covered with blood, it's very troublesome to wash them. Hearing this, the pastor's face instantly became extremely gloomy. He clenched his teeth, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. I'm really confident. Well, let me see what kind of strength the legendary butcher has. After that, he raised his right hand, and then suddenly punched Chen Luo straight to the head. After many years of training, the priest's physical fitness is also at the top level among vampires. Both speed and strength are stronger than most vampires, but such strength is still not worth mentioning in Chen Luo's eyes. He raised his hand lightly, and just when the opponent's fist was about to hit, he calmly reached out to block it. Looking at the astonishment in the opponent's eyes, Chen Luo smiled slightly, and his eyes signaled him to continue. Seeing Chen Luo's eyes, the priest's eyes were bloodshot. Regardless of his fists, he hit Chen Luo like raindrops. The targets were all vital parts such as the heart and head, as if they were putting people to death. In fact, he has no intention of holding back at all. With his physical fitness and fighting skills, it is not a problem for him to be 1 against 10, but such strength is far from enough to cause harm to Chen Luo. Not to mention that Chen Luo's speed has completely crushed the opponent, but with his current defense power, even guns can't leave marks on him, let alone this tickling fist. Although the opponent couldn't cause harm to him even if he didn't make any defense, Chen Luo didn't want to be beaten in place, so facing the opponent's attack, he chose to stretch out his hand to resist. Therefore, under the amazed gaze of everyone in the audience, no matter how fierce the priest's attack looked, Chen Luo never took half a step back and blocked all the opponent's attack with just one hand. Such a performance, immediately, everyone in the audience trembled. On the stage, after seeing that his attack did not cause any damage at all, the pastor's eyes flashed with horror. He never expected that the skill he was so proud of would be useless to him at all. Obviously, this is far from his limit. But even after realizing the difference in strength between the two, the pastor had no intention of stopping. Looking at Chen Luo's indifferent expression in front of him, his eyes flashed fiercely, and he quickly made a decision in his heart. So what about strength? I don't believe it. Can you still be stronger than a bullet? At this moment, with the killing intent in his heart, he couldn't care less. The only thing he wanted to do now was to kill this arrogant guy in front of him. As for the punishment he might face in the future, he had already forgotten all about it. So, when his attack failed again, the pastor quickly stepped back and stretched his hand towards his waist. When his hand just touched the pistol at his waist, the next moment, Chen Luo's voice sounded. Well, it's time for this game to end. In an instant, with a sound of piercing through the air, Chen Luo's body turned into an afterimage and appeared behind the opponent in the blink of an eye. With both hands, huge amounts of palms instantly grasped the opponent's neck firmly and then lifted into the air. But that's not all. The next moment, I saw Chen Luo supporting his head with the other hand, and then pulled it hard. Puff! Under his terrifying strength as high as several tons, the other party had no room to resist, but felt an unprecedented sharp pain from his neck, and then his head was torn off by Chen Luo. The long spine is connected to the bottom of the head, bloody, and the body collapses on the ground weakly. The eyes of the head held by Chen Luo are wide-eyed. The face is full of shock and fear, and the mouth opens and closes several times, as if to say what, but in the end he didn't say a word, so he died of anger. Quiet, deathly silence. Everyone in the audience tightened their eyes, staring at Chen Luo's figure on the stage. While their eyes were full of shock, they also unconsciously revealed a trace of fear from the bottom of their hearts. Obviously, even these elite fighters who have experienced hundreds of battles have never seen such a brutal and bloody scene. Looking at the gloves on Chen Luo's hands that were dripping blood, everyone finally understood why he said that before, but now it seems that it is absolutely correct. After seeing Chen Luo's killing process, everyone who had some doubts about Chen Luo's butcher nickname had no objections at all. Such a bloody method really deserves the name of a butcher. Just when everyone was shocked, Chen Luo turned around and said calmly, "Now, can we talk about the mutant thing?"